in the shadow of time, before Egypt's mighty pyramids pierced the sky, before Greece's elegant columns supported marble temples, and long before Rome's legendary roads connected an empire, humanity's first civilization emerged from the embrace of two life-giving rivers. This cradle of civilization, called Mesopotamia, between the rivers in ancient Greek, flourished in the fertile valley where the Tigris and Euphrates flowed. These twin arteries, descending from the rugged mountains of eastern Turkey to the warm waters of the Persian Gulf, created an oasis of abundance in what we now know as modern Iraq. It was here, amid these nurturing plains, that humans first abandoned their nomadic ways to gather in true cities. Here they invented writing to preserve their thoughts and transactions, codified the first laws to govern their growing communities, and gazed upward to contemplate the mysteries of the cosmos. The blueprint for urban existence, the fundamental patterns of civilization itself, took root in this rich alluvial soil. This remarkable story spans from 10,000 BCE, as the grip of the last ice age loosened and the first permanent settlements appeared, to 539 BCE, when Cyrus the Great marched his Persian army into mighty Babylon. Through these millennia, ambitious kings fashioned empires from the humblest materials, mud, brick, and bronze. Dedicated scribes pressed reed styluses into soft clay, creating the wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform that preserved knowledge for posterity. Visionary architects directed the construction of massive ziggurats, stepped temples reaching toward the heavens where their gods dwelled. Ironically, their records preserved in humble clay tablets, baked hard by time, have outlasted the grandest monuments of many later civilizations. Thus began the first chapter in humanity's urban story. Born in the Fertile Crescent, as retreating glaciers gave way to the dawn of organized society. Chapter 1: The Dawn of Civilization. As the icy mantle of the last great ice age began to recede around 10,000 BCE, a warming breath swept across the landscapes of Southwest Asia, awakening new possibilities for human existence. The frozen constraints that had limited human potential for millennia gradually loosened, their grip on the rolling hills and fertile valleys cradling the twin rivers. It was here that wandering bands of hunter-gatherers made a discovery that would alter the course of humanity. Fields of wild wheat and barley, swaying in abundance across the warming land. For countless generations, these nomadic peoples had followed migrating herds and harvested seasonal plants, carrying their modest possessions on their backs, moving in harmony with nature's rhythms. But in this changing world, they began to linger where sustenance was plentiful. The earliest settlements emerged as humble clusters of round, redanned mud huts at sites like Tel Muribet, Jerf Lohamar, and Abu Huraira in what we now call northern Syria. Archaeological evidence reveals humanity's first tentative steps toward permanence. While still hunting gazelle and gathering wild pistachios, these pioneers remained in one location season after season, forming the first enduring communities. In the verdant Jordan Valley, one settlement blossomed into something unprecedented in human history. Jericho, perhaps humanity's oldest continuously inhabited town, emerged from the soil some 11,000 years ago. Its inhabitants erected stone walls, not merely as homes, but as collective protection, humanity's first evidence of communal defense. They constructed enigmatic tower structures whose purpose continues to puzzle archaeologists today. To the east, at Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, another remarkable community took shape. Residents built mud brick dwellings so tightly clustered that conventional streets became unnecessary. People entered their homes through openings in the roof, navigating the settlement like ants traversing a complex mounda, living, breathing human hive. But the true revolution unfolded silently in the fields surrounding these early settlements. Through generations of careful observation and selection, these pioneering farmers began to domesticate wild grains. They favored plants with larger seeds and husks that remained intact during harvest rather than shattering and scattering their bounty. Generation by generation, wild grasses transformed into cultivated wheat under human guidance. The intentional cultivation of food had begun. Similarly, animals once pursued in the hunt became companions in the field. The mighty aurochs, fierce ancestors of modern cattle, were gradually tamed through selective breeding. Sheep, goats, and pigs followed, providing reliable sources of meat, milk, and hides without the unpredictability and danger of the hunt. This agricultural revolution spread like a slow-blooming flower along the fertile arc of land stretching from the Persian Gulf, up through the river valleys, and around to the Mediterranean coast, the Fertile Crescent. The transformation wasn't sudden but unfolded across centuries, reshaping human existence with each passing generation. The implications were profound and far-reaching. For the first time in our species' long journey, humans could produce more food than they immediately needed. This surplus allowed some individuals to pursue occupations beyond food production. Specialists emerged: potters, crafting vessels, weavers creating textiles, and tool makers forging implements who exchanged their creations for food. During the 6th millennium BCE, another transformative innovation appeared: pottery. While simple containers had been fashioned from stone, wood, and woven reeds for thousands of years, the firing of clay created vessels both lightweight and watertight, revolutionizing storage and transport. Food could be preserved through changing seasons. Liquids could travel across distances previously unimaginable. As agricultural techniques improved, early farming communities encountered new challenges in the lowland plains between the rivers. Rainfall was scarce, but the annual flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates deposited rich, fertile silt. These ingenious people learned to channel this life-giving water to their fields, giving birth to irrigation agriculture, humanity's first large-scale manipulation of the natural environment. By the early 5th millennium BCE, modest villages had blossomed into substantial settlements across the southern alluvial plain. The region, later known as Sumer, with sites like Eridu and Uruk, began as simple farming communities, but would eventually flourish into something revolutionary: the world's first true cities. Water management became the central organizing principle of these developing societies. Coordinating irrigation demanded leadership and organization transcending family units. Communal projects to construct canals and dikes fostered increasingly complex social structures, laying the groundwork for civilization itself. Agriculture brought both abundance and new vulnerabilities. Food surpluses required protection from raiders and careful management for times of scarcity. Religious beliefs evolved to address the uncertainties of agricultural life. The forces governing rain, flood, and drought became personified as deities, requiring appeasement through ritual. Temples began as simple shrines, but grew increasingly elaborate. Nearly 6,000 years ago, Communities were constructing dedicated buildings where specialists, the world's first priests, performed ceremonial rituals to ensure bountiful harvests. These temples became centers not only of worship but of redistribution, where grain was collected and dispensed according to need and status. Social stratification increased with each generation. Those who controlled the surpluses gained temporal power. Those who interpreted the will of the gods acquired spiritual authority. The relative equality of hunter-gatherer bands gradually yielded to hierarchical communities with emerging elites. Technological innovation accelerated as well. Copper, first used for decorative beads and ornaments around 7 millennia BCE, began to be shaped into practical tools and implements. 1,000 years later, metalworkers made a revolutionary discovery: copper mixed with tin created bronze, a material harder and more durable than pure copper. The Bronze Age had dawned, opening new frontiers of technological possibility. Trade networks expanded dramatically, connecting distant lands. Obsidian from Anatolian volcanoes, prized for its razor-sharp edges, traveled hundreds of miles from its source. Lapis lazuli from remote Afghan mountains found its way to temple ornaments in the southern plains. Shells from the Persian Gulf appeared in inland settlements, gleaming evidence of far-reaching exchange networks that culminated toward the end of the 4th millennium BCE in the great city of Uruk. Another momentous development emerged in response to the growing complexity of managing temple resources. Administrators began using small clay tokens to represent quantities of goods. These humble tokens eventually evolved into marks pressed into clay tablets, humanity's first writing system, a revolutionary technology that would transform civilization forever. Initially, these marks were simple pictographs, drawings representing the items being counted. A sketch of a sheep denoted a sheep. Multiple sheep were indicated by multiple marks. But gradually, this system grew more abstract and sophisticated. Marks came to represent not just objects, but sounds, the miraculous birth of true writing, enabling human thought to transcend time and distance. By the dawn of the 4th millennium BCE, the essential foundations of civilization, as we understand it, were firmly established. Cities housing thousands of inhabitants, specialized crafts and professions, monumental architecture, complex religious institutions, social stratification, long-distance trade networks, and written records preserving knowledge across generations. The stage was set for the next magnificent chapter in humanity's journey, the rise of the Sumerians and the world's first true urban civilization, where the scattered seeds of human potential would blossom into unprecedented cultural flowering. Chapter 2: The Rise of Sumer c. 3500 to 2300 BC. The southern alluvial plain, where the twin rivers embraced the sea, became the cradle of humanity's first true civilization, a place where innovation and ambition would forever change the course of human history. Here, between the shimmering waters of marshy deltas and the golden waves of fertile fields, a remarkable people conjured something unprecedented, a constellation of genuine cities, each pulsing with thousands of souls behind walls of sun-baked mud brick. Uruk, jewel among these early urban centers, blossomed with astonishing speed after 3500 BC. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of a metropolis that eventually sprawled across nearly 250 hectares of vast urban landscape that may have sheltered as many as 50,000 people within its boundaries. At the height of its glory, formidable defensive walls embraced neighborhoods where life teemed in densely packed houses, bustling workshops, vibrant marketplaces, and imposing administrative centers. Dominating this urban tapestry stood Uruk's crowning achievement, the magnificent white temple perched majestically atop a towering platform. This sacred edifice rose like an artificial mountain from the flat Mesopotamian plain. Its brilliantly whitewashed walls caught the desert sun and gleamed for miles across the landscape, a beacon of human ingenuity, visible from distant horizons. This massive platform, foreshadowing the classic ziggurats of later eras, testified to both extraordinary engineering skill and profound religious devotion. Other urban centers blossomed across the landscape, clustered near what was once the ancient coastline, now lying far inland due to millennia of riverborne silt deposition. Eridu, venerated in local tradition as the oldest of all cities, housed the spectacular temple complex dedicated to Enki, divine lord of wisdom and life-giving fresh water. Lagash, Kish, Nippur, and Umma flourished into powerful city-states, each cultivating its own distinctive identity, royal lineage, and patron deity who watched over the city's destiny. These urban centers transcended the concept of mere large villages. They embodied a revolutionary new form of human organization. Unlike any settlements that came before, they housed a dazzling array of specialists, not just farmers, but skilled metalworkers, master potters, expert weavers, shrewd merchants, meticulous administrators, disciplined soldiers, and revered priests. Each city's architectural landscape revealed the complex social hierarchy within its walls, imposing temples reaching toward the heavens, administrative centers humming with activity, grand houses for the elite, and modest quarters where common citizens made their homes. The emergence of monumental architecture forever transformed the once empty landscape. Temples evolved dramatically from humble shrines into elaborate, multi-chambered complexes crowning massive, elevated platforms. These early ziggurats, though not yet displaying the classic stepped pyramid form of later periods, nonetheless commanded the skyline with their imposing presence. By 3000 BC, the ancient city of Eridu boasted a temple platform soaring over 11 meters high, an architectural marvel, requiring more than 720,000 individually baked bricks for its construction, each one shaped and placed by human hands. The question of who orchestrated these monumental construction projects unveils another revolutionary innovation of Sumerian society. Formalized leadership institutions. Early governance appears to have operated as a form of shared authority among the community. Councils of respected elders and assemblies of citizens wielded significant influence. But religious leaders, controlling the vast resources of the temples, gradually accumulated greater authority. These individuals evolved into priest-kings, called En in the Sumerian tongue. Their legitimacy flowed from a unique relationship with the gods. They stood as the crucial intermediaries between the divine realm and the world of mortals. When crisis threatened, be it war, devastating flood, or withering drought, communities might appoint a temporary military leader to guide them through peril. These Lugal, literally meaning big man, sometimes transformed their emergency powers into permanent kingship, gradually eclipsing the traditional authority of the priestly class. By 2900 BC, kingship had become firmly established across the cities of Sumer, like a sacred anchor in the political landscape. These rulers claimed divine favara, celestial mandate, to rule though they had not yet ascended to godhood themselves. The royal tombs of this era reveal breathtaking opulence, gleaming gold vessels catching torchlight, jewelry of such intricate craftsmanship that modern eyes can scarcely comprehend their creation, musical instruments silent for millennia, yet still bearing witness to ancient melodies. Most haunting of all, these tombs contain the remains of retainers, servants, guards, and attendants, apparently sacrificed to continue their service in the afterlife, a chilling testament to royal power. Religious devotion saturated every moment of Sumerian existence, as essential and invisible as the air itself. Their spiritual universe teemed with countless deities, a divine reflection of their complex society. Each city proudly elevated its patron deity to supreme importance in local worship. The pantheon's most powerful gods commanded universal reverence: An, who ruled the vast sky dome, and Lil, master of howling winds and thundering storms; Enki, the clever lord of life-giving waters and sacred wisdom; and fierce Inanna, the mercurial goddess embodying both passionate love and devastating warfare. The Sumerians conceived of these gods as magnificent, amplified versions of themselves, beings with human desires, jealousies, and temperaments, yet wielding cosmic power. Temples stood not merely as places of worship, but as the actual earthly homes of these divine beings. Within these sacred walls, priests performed intricate ceremonies designed to please their divine residents. Daily offerings of fragrant foods, fermented drinks, and aromatic incense nourished these heavenly powers, who might otherwise unleash catastrophic floods, withering famines, or brutal invasions upon neglectful worshippers. Their cosmology painted the universe as a flat disk with Earth at its center, enclosed by the great vault of heaven above. Beneath this mortal realm stretched the underworld, the dim, dusty domain where the spirits of the dead continued a muted shadow existence. Unlike later religious traditions, Sumerians offered no paradisiacal reward for virtuous living. The afterlife awaited everyone regardless of earthly conduct, a faded echo of mortal life that awaited all souls. The Sumerians' understanding of natural phenomena wove together practical observation and mythological interpretation. Their medical texts demonstrate remarkable anatomical knowledge and therapeutic approaches, yet simultaneously attribute illness to divine displeasure or malevolent spirits. Their astronomers tracked celestial bodies with impressive precision for agricultural timing and religious festivals, while also interpreting unusual astronomical events as divine messages foretelling earthly events. Among their most revolutionary legacies, cuneiform writing underwent dramatic evolution during this period. What began as simple pictorial representations for accounting purposes blossomed into a sophisticated writing system, capable of expressing nuanced thoughts and recording spoken language. By 2500 BCE, skilled scribes wielded approximately 600 distinct signs to create not merely inventory lists, but correspondence, legal contracts, medical manuals, and literary masterpieces. Literacy remained the precious privilege of a dedicated scribal class. Young boys from elite families entered the tablet houses, the ancient world's first schools, around 7 years of age. There they spent years mastering this intricate system, their fingers pressing reed styluses into damp, clay tablets day after day until the complex signs became second nature. These literate specialists gained significant social standing, serving as the essential administrators, accountants, and record keepers for temples, palaces, and merchant houses. The language they preserved remains linguistically enigmatic, related neither to Semitic nor Indo-European language families. It stands as a linguistic island with no known relatives. Its distinctive grammatical structures and phonetic patterns were captured and preserved through cuneiform writing. When subsequent peoples later adapted this writing system to their own languages, the literature preserved on thousands of clay tablets revealed an astonishingly rich cultural tapestry. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving literary masterpiece, emerged from oral traditions about a real king who ruled Uruk around 2700 BC. This profound narrative chronicles a hero's desperate quest for eternal life following his friend's death, ultimately revealing the bittersweet truth that mortality defines the human experience. The literary landscape flourished with creation myths describing how divine hands molded humans from humble clay to serve celestial masters, soul-stirring hymns exalting gods and monarchs, and wisdom texts offering timeless guidance for navigating life's complexities. Among these treasures, the heart-rending Man and His God explores the mystery of undeserved suffering, a philosophical wrestling match that predates yet mirrors the biblical Job's spiritual crisis. Beyond literature, these remarkable people pioneered humanity's first comprehensive legal frameworks. While the Code of Hammurabi would later capture historical imagination, Sumerian legal fragments dating to 2400 BC reveal a society already crafting sophisticated regulations for commerce, property rights, marriage contracts, and criminal justice. The groundbreaking laws of Yornamu established financial compensation for injuries, a revolutionary departure from the physical retribution principle that would characterize later Semitic codes. The economic heartbeat of these urban centers pulsed through temple and palace complexes, overseeing vast agricultural estates. Temple economies employed thousands of farmers tilling fertile fields, shepherds tending precious flocks, and skilled weavers creating textiles. These institutional powerhouses developed remarkably sophisticated accounting systems, meticulously tracking everything from grain deliveries to complex interest-bearing loans. Alongside these institutional giants, entrepreneurial merchant families thrived, organizing ambitious trading expeditions across astonishing distances. Caravans and ships laden with grain, textiles, and crafted goods ventured outward, returning with precious timber, gleaming metals, and exotic treasures. By 2500 BC, these intrepid traders had established networks reaching the sophisticated Indus Valley civilization, the resource-rich highlands of Iran and Afghanistan, the diverse cultures of Anatolia, and ports throughout the Persian Gulf. Innovation accelerated as ancient minds solved pressing challenges. The potter's wheel c. 3500 BC transformed ceramic production from laborious handcrafting to efficient mass manufacturing. Wheeled vehicles c. 3200 BC revolutionized transportation possibilities. Metallurgists perfected bronze alloys, creating tools and weapons of unprecedented hardness and durability. Mathematical understanding blossomed into a sophisticated sexagesimal system based on units of 60 whose legacy lives on whenever we check our watches or measure a circle. Yet, despite these urban wonders, most Sumerians remained farmers, cultivating fields in the countryside or within the protective shadow of city walls. Their agricultural ingenuity grew increasingly sophisticated. They engineered specialized plows that sliced through dense soil, created intricate irrigation networks with precisely calculated gates and protective levees, and developed techniques to combat the insidious threat of salt accumulation that threatened their life-giving fields. As urban populations swelled, social stratification became increasingly complex. Atop this human pyramid stood kings, priests, and nobles, commanding wealth and authority. Below them, professional scribes preserving knowledge, merchants directing commerce, and master craftsmen creating magnificent works formed a crucial middle tier. The urban majority consisted of ordinary workers, potters, laborers who sustained daily life. At society's lowest level stood slaves, though their condition was often temporary, resulting from debt obligations or wartime capture rather than permanent servitude. Remarkably, women in this ancient society enjoyed rights that would vanish in many later civilizations. They could legally own property, independently operate businesses, and even serve as temple priestesses or trained scribes. While the highest religious and political offices remained exclusively male domains, marriage represented a formal contract between families, typically involving a bride price paid to the woman's parents. Both partners could initiate divorce under specific circumstances, though men wielded greater freedom in these matters. The city-states of Mesopotamia existed in a perpetual dance of rivalry and alliance. Their fertile fields and bustling markets thrived under the shadow of conflict, as disputes over precious water rights, contested boundaries, and lucrative trade routes transformed neighbors into enemies. The drumbeat of war echoed across the plains with alarming regularity. Around 2500 BCE, from this cauldron of competition emerged Inatom, the ambitious ruler of Lagash, who through brilliant military campaigns subdued his neighboring rivals and briefly wove a tapestry of unity across the southern plain. Yet, like morning mist under the harsh Mesopotamian sun, his confederation evaporated almost as quickly as it formed, leaving the region vulnerable to forces gathering beyond its horizons. By 2334 BC, Mesopotamia stood at a crossroads of destiny. The independent city-states had cultivated gardens of extraordinary cultural achievement, technological innovation, and social sophistication, but their ceaseless squabbling had weakened them collectively. To the north, in the shadows near modern Baghdad, destiny was taking human form. A figure of towering ambition and ruthless determination was gathering strength. Sargon of Asiad, a man whose vision would transcend the limitations of the city-state and forge humanity's first true empire, forever altering the political imagination of the ancient world. The brilliant flame of Sumerian civilization would continue to illuminate the path of human progress long after their political independence had been extinguished. Subsequent empires and kingdoms eagerly absorbed their religious pantheons, adapted their literary masterpieces, emulated their artistic conventions, and built upon their scientific discoveries. The cuneiform tablets, preserved in temple libraries and palace archives, ensured that Sumerian wisdom would echo through the corridors of time, even as political fortunes shifted like desert sands. The cultural inheritance of Sumer continued to nourish the roots of Mesopotamian civilization for thousands of years, its influence reaching far beyond the land between the rivers. In the fertile central plains of Mesopotamia, north of the ancient Sumerian heartland, a distinctive culture had been quietly flourishing. While Sumerian cities reached their zenith, these northerners were developing their own civilization, speaking a flowing Semitic tongue that contrasted sharply with the linguistic island of Sumerian. These people absorbed the brilliance of their southern neighbors while maintaining their unique cultural identity. Their world centered around the enigmatic city of Akkad, settlement so thoroughly lost to time that modern archaeologists can only speculate it stood somewhere in the vicinity of present-day Baghdad. From this mysterious capital would arise one of history's most transformative figures, Sargon, a man whose very name, the true king, foreshadowed his extraordinary destiny. Sargon's origins shimmer with mythic qualities that echo through millennia. His own royal inscriptions hint at humble beginnings as the son of a simple gardener tending date palms under the Mesopotamian sun. Later traditions embellished his narrative with the evocative image of an infant set adrift in a reed basket upon the waters of the Euphrates, a motif that would resurface centuries later in the biblical story of Moses. Whatever truth lies beneath these legends, historical evidence reveals Sargon's remarkable rise began in the royal court of Kish, an important northern city-state, serving as a cupbearer, position of intimate trust, allowing access to the ruler. This ambitious young man demonstrated extraordinary political acumen and military insight around 2334 BC through machinations now lost to history. Sargon seized the throne of Kish with this northern power base secured. Sargon's calculating gaze turned southward toward the glittering prize of Sumer's wealthy city-states. There, Lugalzagazia ruler, who had briefly united many southern cities under his banner, merged as Sargon's chief adversary. Their confrontation represented far more than a clash of ambitious men. It was a pivotal moment when two fundamentally different concepts of statehood collided on the Mesopotamian plain. Lugalzagasi championed the traditional model, autonomous city-states loosely affiliated under a paramount ruler. Sargon, however, envisioned something revolutionary, a unified territorial state with direct central control reaching from horizon to horizon. Through a series of brilliant military campaigns, Sargon's forces systematically dismantled Lugalzagesi's coalition. One triumphant inscription boasts that he washed his weapons in the sea, vividly suggesting his armies had reached the distant shores of the Persian Gulf. In victory, the northern conqueror implemented a governance approach that would reshape political imagination for millennia to come. Breaking sharply with tradition, Sargon refused to allow conquered cities their customary autonomy under tribute-paying local dynasties. Instead, he systematically removed established rulers, installing his own loyal officials, softened family members, answerable to him alone. This administrative revolution marked the birth of humanity's first true empire, a vast, multi-ethnic state under centralized authority. At its magnificent zenith, this empire stretched from the gleaming waters of the Persian Gulf to the distant shores of the Mediterranean, encompassing not only the Mesopotamian heartland, but substantial portions of what would later become Syria, Turkey, and Iran. To bind this sprawling realm together, Sargon deployed several ingenious unifying strategies. His native Akkadian tongue became the empire's official administrative language, creating linguistic cohesion across diverse territories. Standardized weights and measures were established throughout the realm, facilitating both imperial taxation and merchant commerce across unprecedented distances. Perhaps most importantly, Sargon forged a revolutionary standing professional army 5,400 elite warriors who ate bread daily before him. Unlike previous forces tied to local loyalties, these soldiers pledged allegiance directly to their emperor, providing the steel backbone necessary to maintain imperial authority across vast territories. The empire's economic foundation stood on three mighty pillars: agricultural surplus, extracted through systematic taxation; strategic control of lucrative trade routes stretching across the known world; and the accumulated wealth of conquered cities. Under the shield of imperial peace, commerce flourished as never before. Merchant caravans and heavily laden ships ventured across distances once thought impossible. Intrepid traders from the heart of Mesopotamia reached the sophisticated cities of the Indus Valley in what is now Pakistan, and pressed northward into the rugged terrain of Central Asia. They returned, bearing precious cargo gleaming lapis lazuli, blood-red carnelian, and essential tint-transforming one's rare luxury goods into commodities available even to common citizens. This unprecedented imperial system delivered both golden prosperity and iron hardship. The Pax Acadica created stable conditions where commerce and cultural exchange thrived. Innovative irrigation works transformed marginal lands into productive fields, increasing food production across entire regions. Yet the empire's appetite proved voracious. Taxation fell heavily on conquered peoples, and imperial authorities could conscript labor at will for massive construction projects or military campaigns. Those who dared resist faced swift and terrible retribution. City walls razed to rubble, and sometimes entire populations forcibly relocated to break their will. According to later king lists, Sargon's reign stretched across an astonishing 56 years, though scholars suspect this might include the reigns of several successors. Nevertheless, his extraordinary longevity provided crucial stability as imperial institutions took root. When death finally claimed him around 2279 BC, he left behind a world fundamentally transformed. The intimate scale of independent city-states had given way to a vast new political reality. The age of empires had dawned. His successors inherited the eternal challenge of imperial governance, maintaining control over a patchwork of territories with different languages, customs, and local interests. Sargon's sons Ramush and Manishtusud voted much of their reigns to crushing rebellions that flared across the empire. Despite their efforts, both met violent ends, likely assassinated after relatively brief rules. From this imperial crucible emerged Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, who ascended the throne around 2254 BC and proved himself the dynasty's most formidable ruler since its founder. Naram-Sin refined imperial administration to new heights and launched bold military campaigns to quell a massive uprising that threatened to tear the empire apart. With calculated brutality and tactical brilliance, he methodically crushed his opponents and meticulously rebuilt the imperial edifice his grandfather had created. Flush with victory, and at the height of his power, Naram-Sin took an unprecedented step that shocked the Mesopotamian world. He declared himself a living god. While previous rulers had claimed divine appointment or portrayed themselves as earthly representatives of celestial powers, Naram-Sin's self-deification represented a radical departure. He commanded scribes to write his name with the divine determinative, the cuneiform sign reserved exclusively for deities. Official artwork depicted him wearing the horned crown, the sacred symbol previously reserved for gods alone. This dramatic elevation of royal status reflected both the awesome power now concentrated in the imperial office and a shrewd political strategy to strengthen loyalty in a diverse realm where local religious traditions varied widely. Naram-Sin's reign marked the dazzling zenith of Akkadian imperial might. His famous victory, Stele, unearthed by archaeologists at Susa in modern Iran, portrays him as a superhuman conqueror, physically towering over his own soldiers, as he triumphantly tramples fallen enemies beneath his feet. The artistic conventions pioneered during this era, depicting rulers as larger-than-life figures of almost supernatural power and achievement, would cast a long shadow across royal iconography throughout the ancient Near East for centuries to come. Despite these magnificent achievements, fractures began to appear in the imperial structure. The sheer vastness of the territories proved increasingly unwieldy with ancient transportation and communication methods. Provincial governors, many from the royal bloodline, gradually cultivated their own centers of power. The treasury strained under the relentless cost of military campaigns needed to quell persistent rebellions across the empire. External threats mounted simultaneously. Royal inscriptions from Naram Sin's reign chronicle battles with the Gudi fierce mountain warriors who descended from the rugged Zagros range to raid eastern settlements. To the northwest, the rising influence of Ebla in Syria challenged Akkadian dominance over crucial trade routes. When Naram-Sin passed into the realm of the gods around 20 to 18 BC, his son, Sharkal-Shari, inherited not just a throne, but a cauldron of brewing crises. Though Sharkal-Shari proved himself a competent ruler who temporarily maintained imperial cohesion, the powerful centrifugal forces pulling at the empires seems ultimately proved insurmountable. Peripheral territories slipped from imperial control one by one. Enemy forces pressed inward from multiple frontiers, while economic foundations crumbled beneath the weight of imperial ambition. A poignant contemporary text captures the chaotic atmosphere of this period with haunting simplicity. Who was king? Who was not king? Words that evoke a landscape of contested power and fractured authority. This turbulent interregnum continued until approximately 2154 BC, when the last nominal Akkadian ruler was forcibly removed from the throne, marking the definitive end of history's first empire. Ancient Mesopotamian chroniclers, viewing history through a theological lens, attributed this dramatic collapse to divine retribution for Naram-Sin's sacrilegious pride and his controversial sack of the holy city of Nippur. Modern scholars, however, identify more tangible factors: ecological degradation from intensive agriculture that undermined food production, the inherent administrative challenges of governing expansive territories with primitive bureaucratic tools, systemic economic instabilities, and the relentless pressure from surrounding peoples eager to claim their share of Mesopotamian wealth. In the aftermath of imperial dissolution, a mosaic of successor states emerged across the once unified landscape. In the southern alluvial plains, ancient cities reclaimed their independence under local dynasties. Northern territories witnessed the rise of new political configurations, while the Gudi tribesmen from the eastern highlands established control over significant portions of the former imperial heartland. Yet the cultural impact of this pioneering empire long outlived its political structures. The fusion of northern Akkadian and southern Sumerian traditions created a rich, hybridized Mesopotamian civilization that would nourish the region's intellectual soil for millennia. The imperial ideal itself, vast, unified realm under a single sovereign authority, became a recurring inspiration for ambitious leaders throughout subsequent ages. So profound was the prestige of Sargon's dynasty that rulers, centuries, and even millennia, later including Assyrian kings, nearly 2,000 years after, would proudly claim connection to this first empire to legitimize their own royal authority. Even as its political framework crumbled, the lasting innovations of this groundbreaking imperial experiment left an indelible imprint on human history. The organizational systems, cultural exchanges, and political concepts pioneered during this remarkable period provided templates for imperial structures that would arise not only in Mesopotamia but across the breadth of the ancient world. Though the Akkadian Empire itself proved relatively ephemeral, spanning less than 2 centuries from brilliant dawn to final twilight, its legacy would echo through the corridors of time for thousands of years as the archetypal blueprint for imperial states yet to come. Chapter 4: The Neo-Sumerian Revival, c. 2112–2004 BC. In the wake of the Akkadian Empire's collapse, the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates fell into disarray. The political tapestry of Mesopotamia unraveled, leaving a patchwork of competing powers across the landscape. From the rugged eastern highlands, the fierce Guti warriors descended like a storm. These dragons of the mountains seized the northern territories, ruling through intimidation rather than administration. Their governance, if it could be called such, consisted mainly of raids and tribute collection, earning them the bitter resentment of the settled peoples who suffered under their domination. Meanwhile, in the south, something remarkable was taking shape. Liberated from northern dominance, yet enriched by the cultural cross-pollination of the imperial era, the ancient Sumerian cities experienced a spectacular renaissance. This period of cultural rebirth, lasting nearly a century, would leave an indelible mark on Mesopotamian civilization. Historians call this the Neo-Sumerian period, a time when ancient traditions were revitalized within innovative political frameworks. Among the southern cities experiencing this cultural flowering, Lagash shone particularly bright under the leadership of Gudea. Though he never sought to build an empire, Gudea's reign witnessed an extraordinary blossoming of artistic and religious expression. The legacy of this pious ruler lives on in dozens of surviving statues, crafted from hard diorite stone, transported from distant quarries. These sculptures, showing Gudea with hands clasped reverently in prayer, reveal both artistic mastery and far-reaching trade connections. The inscriptions accompanying these works describe ambitious temple-building projects undertaken at divine command. One particularly vivid text recounts Gudea's dream visitation from the god Ningirsu, who provided architectural blueprints for a new temple, a remarkable early example of divine revelation in literary form. While Lagash flourished artistically, the seeds of a new political order were taking root elsewhere. Near the shores of the Persian Gulf, an ancient settlement called Ur was becoming the center of a resurgent territorial state. Around 2112 BCE, a visionary leader named Ur-Nammu established a new dynasty there and began the methodical process of reunification. Unlike previous empire builders who relied primarily on military might, Ur-Nammu distinguished himself as a lawgiver and master builder. After driving the Guti from northern lands, he set about creating institutions that would bind society together through justice and shared cultural monuments rather than force alone. His most enduring achievement was a comprehensive legal code, the earliest systematic collection of laws known to history, predating Hammurabi's famous code by more than 3 centuries. This groundbreaking document replaced brutal physical punishments with standardized monetary compensation and explicitly protected society's most vulnerable members, widows, orphans, and the poor from exploitation. In a revealing glimpse of daily life, the code even established history's first known traffic laws, regulating right-of-way for boats navigating the busy canal network. Urnamu's architectural vision transformed the landscape with imposing ziggurats, massive stepped temples that reached toward the heavens. The best preserved example, at your sword, 30 meters skyward, with 3 majestic tiers, connected by triple staircases, visible for miles across the flat Mesopotamian plain. These structures served as physical manifestations of renewed cultural confidence and divine favor. To administer his growing realm, Urnamu developed a sophisticated governance system blending centralized authority with local autonomy. Provincial governors managed regional affairs, while a complex bureaucratic apparatus coordinated resource collection and distribution. Royal officials regularly toured the provinces, and messengers carried communications along established routes between administrative hubs. The Neo-Sumerian revival reached its zenith under Urnamu's son, Shulgi, whose extraordinary 48-year reign brought unprecedented prosperity and organization. This brilliant administrator implemented a series of reforms that strengthens central governance while honoring local traditions. He introduced a standardized calendar, reformed weights and measures, established a royal postal system with relay stations, restructured taxation, and standardized scribal education, creating institutional frameworks that would influence Mesopotamian civilization for centuries to come. Shulgi crafted a powerful image as the ideal ruler through calculated symbolic gestures. In perhaps his most audacious claim, he portrayed himself as an exceptional athlete who personally ran between major temple cities, carrying sacred offerings, covering over 100 miles in a single day. Whether this remarkable feat actually occurred or served as powerful propaganda, it brilliantly symbolized his personal commitment to binding distant religious centers into a unified realm. As his reign progressed, Shulgi followed the path of ambitious predecessors by declaring his own divinity. This wasn't mere vanity, represented a sophisticated political strategy. Temples, honoring his divine cult, sprouted across the kingdom, while scribes began marking his name with the special symbol reserved for gods. By transforming himself into a living deity, Shulgi created a powerful religious foundation that helped unite traditionally independent city-states under a single authority. The economic machinery of this period blended state control with entrepreneurial activity in a sophisticated hybrid system. The government directly managed vast agricultural estates, employed thousands of workers, and orchestrated elaborate redistribution networks to maintain stability. Massive textile workshops, often staffed by hundreds of women-produced fabrics, both for local use and valuable foreign trade. Yet alongside this state apparatus, private merchants conducted their own trading ventures, though typically with royal oversight and taxation. A magnificent cultural flowering characterized this Renaissance era. The ancient Sumerian language, by then no longer spoken in daily life, was deliberately revived for religious rituals and literary expression. Scribal academies thrived, preserving ancient wisdom while creating new works. Many literary masterpieces that would define Mesopotamian civilization for millennia were compiled during this fertile period. Vivid creation myths, hypnotic temple hymns, majestic royal praise poems, and practical wisdom literature that still resonates today. Among the most fascinating innovations was the emergence of royal love songs, passionate lyrical compositions portraying intimate relationships between kings and Inanna. the powerful goddess of love and war. These remarkable poems blended politics with eroticism in sophisticated ways, reinforcing royal legitimacy through divine romance. These compositions employed explicit divine marriage metaphors to sanctify political authority. One particularly revealing hymn describes Şölgi as Inanna's beloved husband, their sacred union symbolically binding together the cosmic and earthly realms, heaven and earth united through the king's body. The kingdom's international relations operated on multiple levels. Strategic royal marriages cemented crucial alliances with neighboring powers. Trade caravans ventured along routes stretching thousands of miles, returning with exotic luxuries from the Indus Valley civilization and distant Afghanistan. Military expeditions secured vulnerable frontiers and protected vital trade routes, particularly against nomadic peoples who periodically swept down from eastern highlands and western deserts to threaten settled communities. This golden age began to lose its luster under Şölgi's successors. The final ruler, Ibisen, faced mounting crises from all directions. One's loyal provincial governors increasingly behaved as independent kings, first withholding tax revenues, then openly declaring their autonomy. Nomadic groups infiltrated from the west, establishing settlements that undermined urban control over rural territories. Persistent drought conditions coincided with the cumulative effects of salinization, a process where centuries of irrigation in an arid climate gradually poisoned the soil with salt deposits, steadily reducing fertility. Clay tablets, recording grain prices from this troubled period, reveal alarming inflation, reflecting severe agricultural distress that threatened the entire social order. A remarkable correspondence between King Ibisen and his governor Ishbiera vividly illustrates the kingdom's unraveling. In these urgent letters, the governor reports being unable to deliver vital grain shipments due to mounting threats from enemies, likely a combination of external nomadic raiders and internal rebellious factions. The situation deteriorated until Ishbiera eventually abandoned any pretense of loyalty and established himself as an independent ruler in Isen, formally seceding from the crumbling state. The final devastating blow came from beyond Mesopotamia's borders. The neighboring state of Elam, centered in what is now southwestern Iran, had quietly grown into a formidable power. Around 2004 BC, Elamite forces, allied with other enemies of the regime, launched a decisive attack that captured Yor itself. The sacred city was methodically pillaged, its magnificent ziggurat desecrated, and Ibisen himself taken captive to Elam, where he apparently died in humiliating exile, the last ruler of a fallen dynasty. A haunting contemporary lament captures the catastrophe in poignant terms. The city has been defiled. Its people live like ghosts. The treasuries have been pillaged. Corpses float in the Euphrates, which once brought life. This remarkable literary work, blending eyewitness historical account with theological reflection, interpreted the destruction as divine punishment for human failings, common theme in Mesopotamian historical understanding. Yet, despite this political collapse, the cultural brilliance of this Renaissance period left an indelible legacy. The legal concepts, literary masterpieces, administrative techniques, and architectural innovations developed during this creative golden age would continue to shape Mesopotamian civilization for centuries to come. As one chapter in the ancient story closed, the foundations were already laid for new political configurations to emerge in the fertile land between the rivers. Chapter 5: The Rise of Babylon c. 1894 to 1595 BC. As the once mighty Ur dynasty crumbled into dust, Mesopotamia shattered into a mosaic of rival city-states, each jealously guarding its territory. No longer united under a single banner, the land between the rivers became a theater of constant competition, with ambitious rulers vying for control of precious water sources, fertile fields, and lucrative trade routes. For nearly a century, this political kaleidoscope shifted and realigned, with powers like Isin, Larsa, Ishnana, and Mari, each claiming brief moments of regional dominance without achieving lasting supremacy. Against this backdrop of fragmentation, a demographic tide was slowly reshaping the cultural landscape. From the arid Syrian deserts came the Amorite semi-nomadic peoples who had been gradually infiltrating Mesopotamia's settled communities for generations. These newcomers spoke a Western Semitic tongue, distinct from both the ancient Sumerian language and the Eastern Semitic Akkadian dialect. Though initially viewed as outsiders, they steadily gained influence, eventually establishing ruling dynasties in several cities. Nestled along the Euphrates in central Mesopotamia, Babylon, whose name, poetically translated as Gate of the Gods, had existed for centuries without distinction. Though blessed with a strategic location, it had long dwelt in the shadow of more illustrious cities. The dynasty's first 5 rulers methodically expanded their realm, erecting formidable walls, raising temples to the gods, and expanding the intricate irrigation networks that were the lifeblood of Mesopotamian agriculture. Despite these efforts, Babylon still paled in comparison to prestigious centers like Larsa and Ishnana. The balance of power shifted dramatically. However, with the ascension of the dynasty's 6th ruler, Visionary, who would transform both his city and the entire region through a brilliant combination of military might, administrative innovation, and masterful propaganda. In his early years, this shrewd monarch focused inward, strengthening his city's foundations before reaching for greater power. Under his direction, irrigation canals extended their life-giving tendrils deeper into the countryside, while temples rose higher and city fortifications grew more imposing. The young king cultivated careful diplomatic relationships with neighboring powers, sometimes serving as mediator in their disputes while avoiding direct confrontation until his own position was unassailable. By mid-reign, having secured his base of power, Hammurabi unveiled his true ambitions. With calculated precision, he launched a series of military campaigns that systematically dismantled rival power centers. Beginning with southern cities like Uruk and Isin, he methodically expanded his control. One by one, the major powers of Mesopotamia fell before Babylonian forces. Wealthy Larsa in the south, Ishnana with its control of eastern trade routes, Mari commanding the middle Euphrates, and finally Ashur in the north, the trading hub that would later spawn the mighty Assyrian Empire. When the dust settled, Hammurabi had accomplished what no ruler had managed since the fall of the Akkadian Empire 5 centuries earlier, the unification of nearly all Mesopotamia under a single authority. Unlike earlier conquerors who portrayed their rule as revolutionary breaks with the past, Hammurabi shrewdly presented himself as a conservative restorer of ancient traditions. His royal inscriptions balanced claims of unprecedented power. The king who made the 4 quarters of the world obedient, with reassuring images of divinely sanctioned benevolence, a shepherd appointed by the gods to bring justice to the land. This emphasis on justice crystallized in his most enduring legacy, the famous legal code that bears whose name, carved into a 2.25-meter black stone stele and crowned with a striking relief showing Hammurabi receiving authority from Shamash, god of justice. This remarkable document contained 282 legal provisions addressing virtually every aspect of society. Discovered by archaeologists in 1901, the Code of Hammurabi stands as one of history's most complete and revealing legal collections, offering a window into the complex social fabric of ancient Babylon. These laws illuminate a society with clearly demarcated social hierarchies, where consequences varied dramatically based on one's standing. The famous principle of an eye for an eye applied only when the parties involved shared equal status. When a higher-ranking person injured someone of lower station, they might escape with mere financial compensation rather than physical punishment. Yet, despite this rigid class structure, the code repeatedly returned to a central theme protecting society's most vulnerable members. As Hammurabi himself declared, his laws existed to prevent the strong from oppressing the weak, to provide justice for the orphan and widow. Contracts to professional standards for physicians and architects, from agricultural agreements to marketplace regulations. Yet, behind this image of the great lawgiver stood an equally brilliant administrator, an economic architect. His government meticulously documented harvests, organized labor forces, and managed resources with remarkable precision. Through a network of royal officials, establishing price controls and overseeing commerce throughout his realm. The king's hands-on leadership style comes alive through hundreds of preserved letters bearing his direct commands. These clay tablets reveal a monarch deeply engaged in daily governance, personally resolving provincial grievances, rooting out corrupt officials, and scrutinizing details of religious rituals and construction projects. This remarkable blend of visionary strategy and meticulous oversight defined Hammurabi's approach to kingship. In the religious sphere, Hammurabi orchestrated a theological transformation that mirrored his political achievements. He elevated Babylon's patron deity, Marduk, from local guardian to supreme divine ruler, while diplomatically maintaining respect for established gods like Anu, Enlil, Shamash, and Ishtar. Royal inscriptions increasingly portrayed Marduk as the divine counterpart to Hammurabi, himself king among gods as the Babylonian ruler was king among mortals. Unlike some predecessors who claimed divine status, Hammurabi positioned himself as divinely appointed rather than divine. His law code's prologue captures this nuanced relationship, named by Anu and Enlil to promote the welfare of the people, to cause justice to prevail in the land. This delicate balance between heavenly mandate and earthly service became the cornerstone of Babylonian political theology. When Hammurabi departed for the afterlife around 1750 BC, he left a seemingly invincible Lagotia unified Mesopotamia under Babylonian authority. His son, Sam-Shulaluna, inherited this impressive edifice, but cracks soon appeared in its foundation. Within years, ancient southern cities with proud cultural heritages erupted in revolt. Though initially quelled with force, these rebellions persisted like smoldering embers, gradually consuming central authority. As these internal fires burned, new external storms gathered. From the southern marshlands emerged the mysterious Sealand dynasty, gradually seizing coastal territories and nibbling away at Babylonian holdings. Simultaneously, mountain warriors from the Zagros range launched raids along eastern frontiers, further stretching Babylonian defenses. Under this relentless pressure, the empire's boundaries steadily contracted. By 1700 BCA, mere half-century after Hammurabi's death, much of the south had slipped from Babylonian grasp, though subsequent rulers maintained control over Mesopotamia's heartland. They never recaptured the territorial grandeur of their illustrious predecessor. Yet despite this political contraction, Babylon itself flourished. The city expanded to cover nearly 450 hectares, housing between 60,000 and 80,000 residents among its monumental temples, royal palaces, and bustling commercial districts. This urban jewel shone as one of antiquity's greatest cities. Within its walls, Babylonian culture underwent a remarkable synthesis, preserving ancient traditions while cultivating innovative expressions. Scholar priests meticulously copied and preserved the wisdom of earlier eras, creating vast collections of literary epics, medical knowledge, mathematical principles, and sacred texts. The Akkadian language of Babylon transcended its origins to become the diplomatic lingua franca throughout the Near East, facilitating communication between diverse kingdoms across the region. Intellectual achievements blossomed in various fields, with particularly impressive advances in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. Babylonian astronomers meticulously charted the heavens, developing sophisticated mathematical models that could predict the movements of planets with remarkable accuracy. Mathematicians wielded an advanced numerical system capable of complex calculations, including sophisticated operations with fractions, solutions to quadratic equations, and pioneering approximations of irrational numbers like the square root of 2. This golden age of creativity persisted for nearly 2 centuries after Hammurabi, though Babylon's territorial influence had diminished. Its cultural and intellectual radiance illuminated lands far beyond its political boundaries, maintaining remarkable stability within its core regions. The dynasty's demise arrived with shocking swiftness. Around 1595 BC, an unforeseen threat materialized from the distant north. The Hittites, an Indo-European people who had established their own formidable kingdom in central Anatolia, modern Turkey, are from traditional Mesopotamian power centers. Under their ambitious ruler, Mersili, Hittite forces embarked on an extraordinary military venture, marching over 500 miles from their homeland in a bold, unprecedented campaign. The Babylonians, their attention fixed on familiar threats from eastern mountains and southern marshes, were utterly unprepared for this northern onslaught. With devastating efficiency, the Hittite warriors breached Babylon's mighty defenses, plundered its legendary treasures, and toppled the dynasty that had ruled for 3 centuries. After this lightning strike, the Hittites withdrew to their Anatolian homeland, apparently content with their spectacular haul of plunder rather than permanent occupation. Into the power vacuum created by this cataclysmic raid stepped another group that had been gradually integrating into northern Mesopotamian society, the Kassites, originally mountain dwellers from the Zagros range. Having served as mercenaries and settled in Babylonian territory for generations, they seized their historic opportunity. Following the Hittite withdrawal, a Kassite chieftain claimed the throne of humbled Babylon, establishing a resilient dynasty that would endure for an astonishing 4 centuries. Though politically transformative, the Hittite attack and Kassite takeover created barely a ripple in Babylon's cultural waters. Rather than imposing their ways, these mountain-born newcomers embraced Babylonian civilization with reverent enthusiasm, adopting its gods, speaking its language, and continuing its venerable traditions. The architectural splendor, literary masterpieces, and administrative systems that defined Babylonian greatness continued uninterrupted under their stewardship. 4 generations afterward, Mesopotamians would look back on Hammurabi's era as their golden age, a time when justice flowed like the life-giving rivers and the region stood united under the brilliant leadership of a city destined to remain the beating heart of their civilization for thousands of years. Chapter 6. Kassite Rule and Regional Powers, c. 1595 to 1155 BC. From the smoking ruins left by the Hittite raid that toppled Hammurabi's dynasty emerged an unexpected new chapter in Babylon's storied history. The Kassites' hardy mountain folk from the rugged Zagros range to the east had been quietly weaving themselves into Mesopotamia's social fabric for generations, serving as fierce mercenaries, establishing rural settlements, and gradually absorbing the sophisticated customs of their adopted homeland. When opportunity presented itself in the power vacuum following the Hittite withdrawal, a shrewd Kassite chieftain named Agum boldly claimed Babylon's vacant throne, founding what would become the most enduring dynasty Mesopotamia would ever know, unlike conquerors before them who had imposed their will through radical change. These newcomers displayed remarkable cultural sensitivity, embracing rather than erasing the traditions of the land they now governed. With political wisdom, they adopted the grand titles, worshipped the ancient gods, and maintained the sophisticated administrative systems of their predecessors. Under their steady hand, Mesopotamia enjoyed an extraordinary period of stability, with the Kassite dynasty maintaining continuous rule for nearly 4 centuries from approximately 1595 to 1155 BC, an unmatched achievement in the region's turbulent history. History has drawn a veil over the early decades of Kassite rule, as few contemporary records survive to illuminate this transitional period. By the mid-15th century BC, however, the historical fog begins to lift, revealing a well-established kingdom that, while geographically more modest than Hammurabi's vast empire, maintained firm control over Babylon's cultural heartland, while orchestrating complex diplomatic relationships with neighboring powers. The wider Near Eastern political landscape had undergone a dramatic metamorphosis during this era. No longer did a single superpower dominate the region. Instead, a delicate balance emerged as several mighty kingdoms coexisted in what scholars aptly call the Club of Great Powers, a sophisticated system of carefully calibrated rivalries and strategic alliances that preserved regional stability. In this exclusive diplomatic circle, alongside the Kassite rulers of Babylon, stood other formidable powers: the magnificent new kingdom of Egypt, the muscular Hittite Empire controlling Anatolia, the wealthy Mitanni kingdom dominating northern Syria, and later, the increasingly assertive Middle Assyrian kingdom. International relations in this cosmopolitan age followed elaborate diplomatic protocols. Royal correspondence inscribed on clay tablets in Akkadian, the period's diplomatic lingua franca, addressed rival rulers as brother, maintaining the polite fiction of equality, regardless of actual power differentials. Royal marriages strategically cemented political alliances, with princesses dispatched to foreign courts, accompanied by dazzling dowries that showcased their homeland's wealth and craftsmanship. A constant stream of merchants and ambassadors traversed well-established routes between glittering capitals, nurturing both profitable trade networks and essential diplomatic channels. The Amarna letters, a remarkable diplomatic archive, unearthed in Egypt, offer a fascinating window into the international relations of the era. These clay tablets preserve the correspondence between Kassite kings and Egyptian pharaohs, revealing an intricate dance of diplomacy, flattery, and thinly veiled demands. In one particularly candid exchange, a Kassite monarch boldly chided Pharaoh Amenhotep III over an underwhelming gift of gold. "Gold in your country is as common as dust," he wrote with barely concealed irritation, pressing for more lavish offerings to finance his ambitious building projects. To govern their realm, Kassite rulers engineered an administrative system that cleverly adapted traditional Babylonian frameworks while introducing crucial innovations. Their most significant contribution was a revolutionary approach to land management. Through officially documented Kuduru stones' intricately carved boundary markers, featuring both legal text and divine imagery, they granted substantial estates to their loyal supporters. These impressive monuments not only recorded the precise details of land grants, but also invoked supernatural protection, with vivid divine symbols and ominous curses threatening anyone who might dare violate these arrangements. This sophisticated system essentially created a web of feudal relationships binding the crown to a powerful class of landed nobility. In the spiritual realm, Kassite rule witnessed a fascinating blend of tradition and innovation. While they prudently maintained traditional Mesopotamian deities at the center of state religion, recognizing the deep cultural attachment to these ancient gods, the Kassites subtly wove their own divine figures into the rich tapestry of Babylonian belief. Particularly noteworthy was their reverence for cosmic deities associated with celestial bodies, an emphasis that catalyzed increasingly sophisticated astronomical observations that would influence Middle Eastern science for centuries to come. Despite their limited military ambitions, the Kassites presided over a remarkable flowering of intellectual achievement. In the hushed chambers of scribal schools, scholar priests meticulously preserved and elaborated upon literary masterpieces inherited from earlier eras. Meanwhile, their counterparts in royal archives developed an unprecedented passion for systematic knowledge organization. These dedicated scholars compiled vast, comprehensive lists categorizing everything from divine names to medical diagnoses, from legal precedents to grammatical forms, creating what were essentially the world's first encyclopedic reference works. Astronomical science reached new heights of precision during this golden age. Court astrologers, initially motivated by the practical need to divine omens relevant to royal decisions, tracked celestial movements with increasingly sophisticated methods. Their meticulous observations, recorded on thousands of clay tablets, gradually accumulated into rich datasets that would eventually enable mathematical prediction of celestial events with remarkable accuracy. It was during this intellectually vibrant period that the zodiacal system dividing the ecliptic into 12 segments, named after distinctive star patterns, began to take the recognizable form that would later influence astronomical and astrological traditions throughout the ancient world. Medical texts from the period reveal a dual approach to healing, combining empirical treatments, herbal remedies, surgical procedures, and dietary recommendations, with spiritual interventions addressing divine or demonic causes of illness. Diagnostic manuals linked observed symptoms to prognoses and appropriate treatments, showing sophisticated clinical observation. Despite limited understanding of internal physiology, artistic traditions displayed technical mastery within established conventions. The distinctive calcite style in cylinder seals featured precisely carved figures with elaborate detail. Kassite master artisans wove their cultural tapestry with exquisite precision, honoring ancient Babylonian traditions while breathing fresh life into them through subtle innovations. Their artistic vision crafted a distinctive aesthetic fusion that echoed the diverse origins of their society. In their workshops, glassmakers achieved unparalleled mastery, producing vessels of breathtaking beauty, swirling with vibrant hues that seemed to capture liquid sunlight. These dazzling creations became prized treasures that graced the palaces and temples of kings and priests throughout the Near East. Magnificent Babylon stood as the beating heart of their realm, living monument to their administrative genius and cultural patronage, its streets humming with the rhythms of commerce and ceremony. Though the kingdom had retreated from Hammurabi's vast imperial boundaries, the capital itself remained a wonder to behold, an urban masterpiece that continued to inspire awe in visitors from distant lands. Within its imposing walls, golden-topped ziggurats pierced the heavens, casting their long shadows across bustling bazaars where merchants haggled in a dozen tongues, while in the winding residential quarters, the homes of scholars, priests, craftsmen, and laborers created a vibrant mosaic of Mesopotamian life. The Kassites lavished extraordinary resources on the great Temple of Marduk, Babylon's divine patron, undertaking ambitious renovation projects that elevated this sacred complex to unprecedented splendor, cementing the city's status as the religious nexus where heaven and earth converged. Where their neighbors brandished swords with eager ambition, Kassite monarchs wielded the subtle weapons of diplomacy, crafting a sophisticated foreign policy that relied on shrewd negotiation and strategic marriages rather than conquest. Their armies marched primarily to secure contested frontiers or repel foreign incursions, practical necessities, rather than glory-seeking adventures that might drain the kingdom's resources and disrupt its prosperous stability. This diplomatic wisdom served as the bedrock of their dynasty's extraordinary longevity, allowing generation after generation of Kassite kings to navigate the treacherous currents of Near Eastern power politics, while maintaining Babylon's cultural preeminence. Yet this very preference for negotiation over militarism would ultimately expose their kingdom to grave danger. When confronted with the rising tide of aggression flowing from the northern horizons, from the rugged northern lands, wreathed in mountain mists, emerged a reinvigorated Assyrian's power, swelling like a river in spring flood, as it methodically expanded its territorial reach. The architects of this northern resurrection were ambitious warrior kings like Adad-nirari and Shalmaneser-I, whose ruthless determination and military innovations transformed Assyria's fortunes. Before their eyes, the ancient world witnessed a remarkable metamorphosis. What had once been merely a prosperous trading hub built on mercantile savvy and commercial connections transformed into an expansionist juggernaut. At its core pulsed a fearsome military machine honed to lethal perfection. By the 13th century BC, Assyria's iron-disciplined armies clad in scale armor and wielding advanced weaponry began probing southward. Their systematic campaigns challenged Kassite control over northern Mesopotamia, sending tremors through the delicate diplomatic architecture that had maintained equilibrium between the great powers for generations. This precarious balance shattered with apocalyptic finality around 1200 BC, when a perfect storm of catastrophes engulfed the ancient Near East like a tidal wave of destruction. Without warning, the mighty Hittite Empire, which had dominated Anatolia for centuries, imploded with shocking suddenness. Its magnificent capital, Hattusa, once teeming with life and imperial grandeur, was abandoned to devouring flames and haunting silence. Egypt's far-reaching imperial influence contracted violently as the pharaohs struggled against mounting internal challenges and mysterious maritime raiders, the enigmatic sea peoples, whose swift ships brought terror to coastal settlements. Meanwhile, the intricate web of trade routes that had bound the civilized world together for centuries unraveled like rotting cloth. Cities that had flourished for generations as prosperous hubs of commerce withered into ghostly shadows of their former glory. This unprecedented cascade of collapse and abandonment swept across the region like a contagion. The causes behind this system-wide failure continue to perplex historians and archaeologists, who debate competing theories ranging from devastating climate shifts that triggered widespread crop failures and subsequent famine. Others point to massive population movements that may have unleashed violent conflicts between established kingdoms and desperate newcomers fighting for survival in increasingly resource-scarce landscapes. Whatever volatile combination of calamities converged in this pivotal era, the outcome was a cataclysmic breakdown that modern scholars have termed the Bronze Age collapse, a perfect storm that shattered political institutions, severed economic lifelines, and unraveled social fabrics that had nurtured prosperity across the Near East for centuries. Like a sturdy oak amid a forest of toppling trees, the Kassite kingdom demonstrated extraordinary resilience in this chaotic landscape, outliving many of its once mighty contemporaries through nimble adaptability and deeply embedded institutional strength. Yet even this enduring realm, seasoned by centuries of diplomatic mastery, eventually crumbled beneath relentless external pressures that hammered at its foundations from all sides, like waves battering a weathered seawall. From the rugged eastern mountains, Elamite warriors descended like wolves, pouring out of their highland strongholds in southwestern Iran to unleash increasingly savage raids that cut deep into the Babylonian heartlands. The devastating climax arrived around 1160 BC, when the ambitious Elamite monarch Shetrukhnahunt orchestrated a brutal campaign of conquest, sweeping through Babylonian cities and seizing priceless Sinja's cultural treasures as war trophies, including the magnificent victory stele of Naram Sin and the revered law code of Hammurabi, symbols of Mesopotamian civilization itself. This crushing Elamite onslaught delivered the fatal blow to Kassite authority. From the ancient southern city of Isin, a native Babylonian dynasty seized this moment of weakness to reclaim their ancestral throne around 1155 BC, bringing the curtain down on 4 remarkable centuries of Kassite dominion. Rising from the ashes of Kassite rule, the ambitious Second Dynasty of Isin launched a vigorous campaign to restore Babylonian glory through magnificent architectural renewal projects and bold retaliatory strikes against Elam, achieving spectacular victories under dynamic rulers like Nebuchadnezzar. Ihu triumphantly recovered stolen divine statues and looted cultural treasures in campaigns celebrated as divine vindication. Despite this dramatic shift in political power, the cultural tapestry woven over centuries remained largely intact, its patterns undisturbed. The Kassite era had permanently enriched the vibrant fabric of Babylonian civilization, adding threads of innovation that could never be unraveled. Their 4 centuries of relatively peaceful governance had cultivated a fertile garden where intellectual and artistic achievements blossomed magnificently, proving that lasting cultural legacy need not be written in the blood of conquest. Their revolutionary approaches to organizing human knowledge, their patient mapping of celestial movements, their innovative systems for managing land resources, and their distinctive artistic traditions established during this golden age would continue to illuminate Mesopotamian civilization for countless generations, like stars that guide travelers long after their creators have departed. As bronze weapons gradually yielded to iron implements around 1000 BC, new powers and peoples stepped onto the stage of history, redrawing the political boundaries of Mesopotamia once again. Yet the enduring cultural foundations established during the Kassite period, built upon millennia of accumulated wisdom and innovation, provided a remarkably resilient framework that enabled Babylonian civilization to weather dramatic political storms and eventually experience glorious renaissances under future dynasties, like a phoenix perpetually rising from its own ashes. Chapter 7. The Assyrian Empire c. 1300 to 609 BC. While Babylon basked in the relative calm of Kassite governance, a fearsome power was stirring in the northern reaches of Mesopotamia, cradled by the flowing waters of the upper Tigris River, amid rolling hills and rain-fed fields. The Assyrians forged a civilization renowned for its military might, administrative brilliance, and unwavering resolve. This northern society emerged from the ancient trading hub of Ashur, which lent them their name, where they had cultivated extensive commercial networks linking Anatolia, the Mediterranean coastlands, and the wealthy cities of southern Mesopotamia. Their experience as merchants at the crossroads of civilizations gifted them invaluable knowledge of distant lands and resources, intelligence that would later fuel their imperial dreams. Their metamorphosis from merchant city-state to conquering empire began as a gradual evolution during the 14th century BC. Pioneering rulers like Ashur-uballit I circa 1363 to 1328 BC boldly cast off the yoke of foreign influence and began asserting Assyria's presence in regional politics. In correspondence with the Egyptian pharaoh, this ambitious monarch dared to style himself Great King, claiming parity with the established powers and signaling Assyria's dramatic rise from minor kingdom to emerging force. The pace of military expansion quickened under his successors. Adad-nirari I and Shalmaneser I extended Assyrian dominion during the 13th century BC, instituting a system of provinces under direct control of appointed officials, a departure from the looser vassal arrangements common in the era. While neighboring powers crumbled during the catastrophic Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BC, Assyria weathered the storm, though its territorial reach temporarily contracted. The decisive turning point arrived with the reign of Tiglath-Piles I, circa 1114 to 1076 BC. This indefatigable sovereign launched campaigns in every direction: northward into the Armenian highlands, westward to touch the Mediterranean shores, eastward into the forbidding Zagros Mountains, and southward to challenge Babylonian territories. His royal inscriptions boast of crossing the mighty Euphrates 28 times to battle western enemies, while also celebrating lion hunting as royal sport, establishing the twin pillars of Assyrian kingship, the warrior and the hunter. Following Tiglath-Pileser I's passing, Assyria entered a period of contraction spanning nearly 2 centuries. External pressures from Aramean tribal confederations combined with internal succession struggles to constrain territorial ambitions. Yet, even during this time of diminished influence, the crucial institutions and cultural foundations that would later support imperial expansion continued to develop and mature. The groundwork for extraordinary imperial resurgence was laid during the 9th century BC. Three visionary rulers stand out as the architects of Assyria's rebirth: Ashurnasirpal II, Shalmaneser III, and Shamshi-Adad V. Under their determined leadership, the machinery of empire was systematically crafted and perfected. This transformation is dramatically illustrated by Ashurnasirpal 2883 to 859 BCE, who established a magnificent new capital at Kalhu, modern Nimrod. There, he erected a stunning palace adorned with intricately carved stone reliefs glorifying royal achievements. These narrative sculptures depicting military triumphs, royal hunts, and sacred ceremonies created a powerful propaganda medium that subsequent rulers would expand to unprecedented scale. The inauguration of this palatial complex was marked by a legendary feast, reportedly hosting 69,574 guests. Over 10 days, a breathtaking demonstration of wealth and organizational capability. Military innovations transformed the Assyrian army into an unstoppable juggernaut. Iron weaponry, having supplanted bronze, provided a decisive technological edge. Specialized divisions, charioteers, cavalry, archers, and siege engineers operated with remarkable coordination. A corps of professional warriors was augmented by seasonal conscripts and auxiliaries drawn from subject territories. Logistics received meticulous attention, with elaborate supply networks supporting campaigns in distant lands. Administrative systems matched this military sophistication. Conquered regions were organized into provinces governed by appointed officials directly accountable to the king. Local elites from newly integrated territories might be incorporated into the imperial structure, but their sons were frequently brought to the Assyrian capital for education and as hostages, ensuring their father's continued loyalty. An extensive network of roads, way stations, and messenger services facilitated swift communication throughout the realm. Perhaps most notorious was Assyria's calculated use of terror as statecraft. Royal inscriptions and palace reliefs explicitly portrayed horrific punishments inflicted upon rebels: flaying alive, impalement, and mass executions. Cities that resisted were razed to the ground, their populations forcibly relocated to distant corners of the empire. While undoubtedly embellished for propaganda purposes, these accounts reflect a deliberate strategy of psychological warfare designed to break the will to resist. The empire expanded dramatically under Tiglath-Pileser III, 745 to 727 BCE, a usurper who seized the throne and implemented sweeping reforms, fragmenting larger provinces into smaller units to prevent governors from amassing dangerous levels of power. He expanded the practice of mass deportation, transplanting conquered populations throughout the empire to dissolve local identities and resistance networks. He also revolutionized the military, establishing a larger standing army, less dependent on seasonal levies. Under Tiglath-Pileser III and his successors, particularly Sargon II, Sennacherib, and Esarhaddon, empire reached unprecedented dimensions, eventually encompassing most of the Middle East, from western Iran to central Egypt, from the Persian Gulf to central Anatolia. This vast dominion incorporated diverse ecosystems, economies, and populations, presenting monumental administrative challenges. The complex relationship between Assyria and Babylon illuminates the evolution of imperial strategy. Early Assyrian monarchs approached Babylon with reverence, acknowledging its ancient cultural prestige. Tiglath-Pileser III embraced the traditional approach of being crowned separately as king of Babylon under a different throne name. His son Shalmaneser V maintained this practice. When Sargon II seized power in 722 BCE, he continued this dual monarchy approach. His son Sennacherib, however, grew increasingly frustrated with persistent Babylonian rebellions backed by their Elamite allies. After crushing several uprisings with mounting irritation, Sennacherib's patience finally snapped in 689 BCE in an unprecedented act of fury. He ordered the total annihilation of Babylonia, decision that sent shockwaves through the ancient world, given the city's immense religious and cultural importance. The vengeful Assyrians methodically dismantled irrigation networks, razed sacred temples to the ground, and carried divine statues back to Assyria as trophies of war. Most sacrilegious of all, they seized the sacred image of Marduk, Babylon's supreme deity, holding it hostage in Assyria and effectively paralyzing the city's essential religious ceremonies. This extreme approach backfired spectacularly, triggering waves of religious outrage across Mesopotamia and even within Assyria itself. When Sennacherib was assassinated in 681 BC, reportedly while praying in a temple, many saw divine retribution at work. His son Esarhaddon, recognizing the strategic blunder, completely reversed his father's policy. Among his first royal acts was ordering Babylon's complete reconstruction, understanding that religious legitimacy and cultural respect often achieved what raw brutality could not. Esarhaddon's inscriptions cleverly position him as a divinely appointed restorer rather than conqueror. With remarkable diplomatic finesse, he maintained the distinct cultural identities of both Assyria and Babylonia, while keeping both firmly under his imperial control. Esarhaddon achieved what had eluded all his predecessors, the conquest of Egypt, in a stunning military campaign in 671 BCE. Assyrian forces swept into the Nile Delta, capturing Memphis, the ancient capital of Lower Egypt. This remarkable victory expanded Assyrian dominion to its greatest territorial extent, creating a truly multi-continental empire that straddled Africa and Asian, achievement unparalleled in previous history. The empire reached its zenith under Ashurbanipal, 668 to 627 BCE, who presided over Assyria at both its cultural and territorial peak. Breaking from the traditional image of Assyrian kings, Ashurbanipal proudly highlighted his literacy and scholarly accomplishments alongside his military exploits. His passion for knowledge transformed Nineveh into an intellectual center, where the royal library collected texts from across Mesopotamia. This vast repository preserved nearly 30,000 clay tablets containing literary or religious, scientific, and historical works, a priceless collection that survived for modern discovery, precisely because of the cataclysmic destruction that would soon engulf the Assyrian capitals. Yet beneath this facade of invincibility, the colossal empire struggled with mounting structural weaknesses. Maintaining control over such vast territories drained military resources and administrative capacity to their limits. The constant warfare, while generating immediate plunder and tribute, gradually exhausted both manpower reserves and economic sustainability. Throughout the empire, subject populations repeatedly uprooted from their homelands and exploited for imperial gain harbored deep-seated resentment against their Assyrian overlords, waiting for any opportunity to break free from the yoke of oppression. The imperial machine maintained its momentum under Ashurbanipal's iron-fisted leadership, but his death, around 627 BCE, suddenly exposed the fragility lurking beneath the impressive imperial facade. Vicious succession disputes fractured central authority at precisely the moment when external threats gathered like storm clouds on the horizon. In this atmosphere of imperial vulnerability, Babylonundr, the ambitious leadership of a Chaldean dynasty headed by Nabopolassar, seized its chance and declared independence in 626 BCE. At first glance, this rebellion appeared to be just another in the long series of Babylonian revolts that Assyrian armies had routinely crushed throughout their history. But this time was different. Nabopolassar proved himself an exceptionally determined, resourceful, and strategic leader, capable of outmaneuvering the still formidable Assyrian military machine. Even more ominously for Assyria, he forged a crucial alliance with the Medes, a powerful Iranian people who had built an imposing kingdom in the rugged Zagros Mountains. This Babylonian-Median coalition launched a daring offensive directly into the Assyrian heartland, striking at the very core of imperial power by targeting the great cities that had served as capitals. The ancient religious center of Ashur fell in 614 BCE, followed by magnificent Nineveh in 612 BCE, after a brutal 3-month siege that tested the limits of both attackers and defenders. When the city finally fell, the vengeance was merciless. The attackers set fire to the opulent palaces and temples that had symbolized Assyrian might, toppled the imposing walls that had seemed impregnable, and carried away centuries of accumulated treasures. A small remnant of the Assyrian court established a last stand at Haran, clinging desperately to the fading embers of imperial glory. But by 609 BCE, Assyrian independence had been completely extinguished. Vanishing from the political landscape it had dominated for centuries. The fall of Assyria was as breathtakingly sudden as its rise had been meteoric. An empire that had held the Near East in its iron grip for generations disappeared so completely that within just 2 generations, its once magnificent capital cities lay abandoned and forgotten, their splendid buildings reduced to windswept mounds slowly being reclaimed by the desert. The Hebrew prophet Nahum's jubilant proclamation of Nineveh's fall, "Woe to the city of blood, full of lies," captured the profound hatred that Assyria's brutal imperial practices had cultivated among the peoples it had subjugated. Yet, even in its dramatic downfall, Assyria left an indelible legacy on world history. The sophisticated imperial systems they developed to administer vast territories provided blueprint models that subsequent empires would adopt and adapt. Their extensive network of roads, administrative centers, and swift communication systems created unprecedented levels of military and economic integration across previously fragmented and isolated regions. Their meticulous practice of gathering and preserving knowledge from throughout their domains saved countless cultural and literary treasures for posterity. And perhaps most significantly, the Assyrian Empire represented humanity's first successful attempt to create a truly international political order encompassing diverse peoples, languages, and traditions under unified governance, a remarkable achievement that, despite the often brutal methods employed to maintain it, forever changed the course of world history. Chapter 8: Neo-Babylonian Empire, c. 626 to 539 BC. From the smoldering ruins of Assyrian tyranny emerged a phoenix-like Babylonian state, destined to craft one final, dazzling chapter in the epic of Mesopotamian civilization. The Neo-Babylonian or Chaldean Empire, though fleeting at less than a century, achieved such breathtaking cultural brilliance and historical impact that it forever etched Babylon into the world's collective imagination. This remarkable renaissance began with Nabopolassar, a shrewd leader from the Chaldean tribes who had gradually settled throughout southern Mesopotamia, strategically exploiting Assyria's increasingly tenuous control. In a bold move, he proclaimed independence in 626 BC and methodically consolidated power throughout the southern territories. His masterful alliance with the Medes provided the crucial military might needed to directly challenge Assyrian supremacy, culminating in the spectacular fall of Nineveh in 612 BCA, devastating blow that shattered Assyrian dominance. Nabopolassar confronted the immense challenge of rebuilding a nation that had endured centuries under foreign rule. With methodical determination, he initiated ambitious reconstruction projects across major urban centers, overhauled administrative frameworks, and delicately balanced competing interests between traditional Babylonian urban elites and his Chaldean tribal supporters. By his death in 605 BC, he had established a robust foundation upon which his son would construct an extraordinary legacy. That son, Nebuchadnezzar II, would emerge as the defining figure of this golden age of visionary monarch, whose remarkable 43-year reign transformed Babylon into the most awe-inspiring metropolis the ancient world had ever witnessed. Ascending the throne after his father's passing, the young king had already proven his military brilliance as crown prince, commanding armies against Egyptian forces attempting to fill the power vacuum left by Assyria's collapse. Nebuchadnezzar's early campaigns decisively secured the western territories of the former Assyrian Empire, extending Babylonian authority through Syria and Palestine to the very borders of Egypt. His momentous siege of Jerusalem in 597 BC, followed by a more catastrophic conquest in 587 BC, resulted in the destruction of the Hebrew Temple and the forced exile of Judea's elite to Babylon. This pivotal event in Jewish history was captured poignantly in biblical texts and immortalized in the haunting lament, "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion." Having secured his frontiers through decisive military campaigns, Nebuchadnezzar redirected his formidable energy toward internal development and monumental architectural projects, the vast wealth flowing into imperial treasuries from tribute, commerce, and agriculture funded an ambitious building program that would transform Babylon into a wonder that defied imagination. Though already ancient, with a history stretching back nearly to millennia, Nebuchadnezzar reimagined the city on a scale never before attempted. Colossal new walls, reportedly so massive that a 4-horse chariot could turn around atop them, encircled an urban expanse exceeding 850 hectares. An intricate network of canals and quays masterfully regulated water flow from the Euphrates, which flowed majestically through the city's heart. Grand processional avenues, meticulously paved with limestone and adorned with vibrant glazed brick reliefs depicting lions, dragons, and bulls, connected the major religious and administrative hubs. Most breathtaking of all stood the magnificent temple complex dedicated to Marduk, Babylon's patron deity. At its center soared the ziggurat Edamananki, ascending in 7 brilliantly colored tiers to a towering height of over 90 meters, the likely inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel. Alongside it stood the main temple, housing the resplendent golden statue of Marduk and countless treasures accumulated from conquered lands. The royal palace complex rivaled the temples in splendor. Numerous courtyards, grand audience halls, and administrative buildings formed a veritable city within the city. Here, according to Greek tradition, Nebuchadnezzar constructed the legendary Hanging Gardens' elaborately irrigated terraces, bursting with exotic plants and trees purportedly created to comfort his Median wife, who longed for the verdant landscapes of her mountainous homeland. Though archaeological evidence for these gardens remains elusive, the very fact that they became celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world testifies to Babylon's enduring grip on the imagination of subsequent civilizations. The annual New Year's festival stood as the crowning jewel of Babylonian spiritual and civic life. For 11 glorious days, the city pulsed with ritual energy as priests recited the Enuma Elishtat ancient tale of how Marduk vanquished primordial chaos to establish divine order. At the ceremony's heart stood the king himself, participating in perhaps the most dramatic public theater imaginable. In a breathtaking display of theological humility, the high priest would actually strike the monarch's face and force him to kneel before Marduk's resplendent statue. This ritualized subjugation carried profound symbolic weight. Even the mightiest mortal ruler was but a servant to divine authority. Nebuchadnezzar's vision extended far beyond Babylon's imposing walls. Throughout his vast domains, he orchestrated a renaissance of infrastructure that transformed daily life. Intricate irrigation networks, masterfully engineered, brought life-giving waters to fields that had lain fallow for generations. Ancient temples, some dating back to Sumerian times, rose anew under his patronage. A web of secure trade routes, protected by strategic military outposts, rekindled commercial vitality across the region, healing the economic wounds inflicted during Assyria's turbulent final years. The intellectual achievements of this golden age were no less impressive, with Babylonian astronomers reaching unprecedented heights of celestial understanding. Court scholars, working in the shadow of ziggurats, refined observational techniques with remarkable precision. Though their primary goal remained religious deciphering divine messages encoded in the heavens there, methodical approach produced mathematical innovations of such sophistication that they laid the groundwork for scientific astronomy that would influence cultures for millennia to come. Literary brilliance flourished in this fertile cultural soil. In the hushed chambers of scribal schools, learned masters preserved ancient wisdom while crafting fresh compositions. The Babylonian creation epic achieved its definitive form during this cultural flowering, weaving together threads of older traditions into a magnificent tapestry that explained cosmic order and divine kingship. Royal chronicles immortalized the achievements of kings, while specialized texts transmitted practical knowledge spanning everything from healing arts to architectural engineering. The economic tapestry of Neo-Babylonian society revealed remarkable complexity, as evidenced by thousands of surviving clay tablets. These meticulous records depict a sophisticated system where state-controlled enterprises operated alongside private initiative. Vast temple complexes and palace organizations functioned almost as corporate entities, managing extensive agricultural estates, specialized workshops, and far-reaching commercial operations. Yet, the economic landscape extended beyond institutional dominance. Enterprising families built thriving, independent businesses, with some evolving into powerful banking houses that financed ambitious ventures through remarkably sophisticated lending arrangements. This economic vibrancy masked a critical vulnerability, however. When Nebuchadnezzar died in 562 BC, the empire's institutional foundations proved shakier than its magnificent architecture. Without robust structures to manage succession, stability crumbled with alarming speed. His son Amel-Marduk, known as Evil Merodach in biblical texts, barely warmed the throne before being overthrown by Neriglissar, a military commander who had married into royal circles. After Neriglissar's brief reign, his young son was swiftly deposed in favor of Nabonidus, a figure whose connection to the royal lineage remains shrouded in mystery. This enigmatic ruler would write the final chapter of independent Babylon, governing through increasingly controversial policies that generated mounting opposition. Nabonidus displayed unusual devotion to Sin, the moon deity, elevating this god's status in ways that profoundly disturbed Marduk's influential priesthood, who had long enjoyed religious primacy. Even more astonishing, Nabonidus abandoned his capital for an astounding decade, spending 10 of his 17-year reign in the distant Arabian oasis of Tema, while his son Belshazzar served as regent in Babylon. What drove this unprecedented royal absence remains one of history's enduring puzzles. Scholars have proposed commercial motivations, religious revelations, or even chronic illness as possible explanations. Whatever his reasons, this extraordinary arrangement fatally undermined central authority and alienated crucial power bases within Babylonian society. The priests of Marduk, hereditary noble families, and urban elites simmered with resentment. As internal discontent festered, a formidable new force gathered momentum beyond the empire's eastern frontiers. The Persians, led by the brilliant strategist Cyrus, later immortalized as the Great, had been methodically consolidating control across the Iranian plateau. After overthrowing their former Median overlords, they forged a formidable new kingdom that expanded with breathtaking speed. By 539 BC, Persian armies approached Babylon's territories, having already overwhelmed outlying defensive positions. The biblical narrative of Babylon's fall, with its dramatic account of mysterious writing appearing on the palace wall during Belshazzar's feast, interpreted by the prophet Daniel, conjures images of divine judgment crashing down upon decadent revelers. Archaeological evidence and contemporary Persian accounts paint a starkly different picture. Babylon capitulated with remarkably little resistance, and Cyrus entered not as a vengeful destroyer, but as a respectful new guardian. His famous cylinder inscription, unearthed by modern archaeologists, portrays him as Marduk's chosen instrument, divinely appointed to restore proper worship and just governance after Nabonidus' alleged religious negligence, whether orchestrated through divine intervention or brilliant political calculation. This remarkably peaceful transition preserved Babylon's physical magnificence while extinguishing its political sovereignty. The dazzling Neo-Babylonian Empire transformed into a wealthy province within Cyrus's vastly larger Persian Empire, an entity that would pioneer revolutionary approaches to multicultural governance. Thus concluded the final chapter of truly independent Mesopotamian civilization, bringing the curtain down on over 3 millennia of indigenous rule between the rivers. Though Babylon would endure as an important administrative center for centuries under successive Persian, Greek, and Parthian rulers, its indigenous political traditions had reached their conclusion. Yet the legacy of this brief but incandescent Neo-Babylonian Renaissance would echo through the corridors of time, preserved not only in archaeological wonders, but in humanity's cultural consciousness. From poignant biblical narratives of exile and prophetic visions to Greek historical chronicles, From the celebrated wonders of the ancient world to Babylon's enduring symbolic power in art and literature across countless generations, this final flowering of Mesopotamian civilization left an indelible imprint on human history. Chapter 9. The Persian Conquest, 539 BC. In the fateful year of 539 BC, the ancient world witnessed a monumental shift that would forever alter the course of Mesopotamian civilization. After flourishing for 3 millennia under indigenous rulers' tapestry of Sumerian city-states, Akkadian conquerors, Babylonian kings, and Assyrian emperors, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates would experience a profound transformation. The rivers that had nurtured mankind's earliest urban societies would now flow through a vast multicultural empire governed from distant highlands. Yet this pivotal transition came not with the thunderous destruction so common in ancient conquests, but through an almost poetic transfer of power that preserved Babylon's golden splendor, while fundamentally reimagining its political destiny. At the center of this world-altering drama stood Cyrus II of Persia, figure whose humble origins belied his destiny to become Cyrus the Great, architect of history's first truly multicultural empire. The Persian people had emerged from the rugged terrain of the southern Zagros Mountains, where they lived as semi-nomadic tribes scattered across the Iranian plateau, dwelling in the shadow of mightier kingdoms that dominated the ancient Near East. Under the ambitious leadership of Cyrus's forebears, the Achaemenid clan had carved out a modest kingdom centered on Anshan in southwestern Iran. Though they maintained their distinct identity, these early Persian rulers acknowledged the suzerainty of the more powerful Median Empire to their north. According to the colorful account of Herodotus, the Greek father of history, Cyrus's path to greatness was shrouded in mythic overtones from the beginning. His maternal grandfather, the Median king Astyages, haunted by prophetic dreams that his grandson would one day usurp his throne, had ordered the infant Cyrus killed. Like many legendary founders throughout world mythology, the child destined for greatness miraculously survived. Raised in secret obscurity, young Cyrus grew to manhood and ultimately fulfilled the very prophecy his grandfather had desperately sought to prevent, overthrowing Astyages and claiming the vast Median territories as his own. What followed was nothing short of astonishing. With the strategic brilliance of Alexander and the speed of Genghis Khan, Cyrus transformed this initial victory into an unstoppable campaign of conquest that redrew the map of the known world. Within a breathtaking decade, Persian armies swept across Western Asia with irresistible momentum. The fabulously wealthy kingdom of Lydia in Anatolia, whose king Croesus was so rich his name became synonymous with wealth itself, fell before Persian might. The sophisticated Greek cities along the Ionian coast bowed to Persian authority. Across the Iranian plateau, diverse peoples and ancient kingdoms found themselves incorporated into Cyrus's rapidly expanding realm. Behind these extraordinary military successes lay a commander whose tactical innovations and strategic flexibility allowed him to outmaneuver larger forces across varied terrains. Yet it was not merely martial prowess that distinguished Cyrus in the annals of history. Perhaps his most revolutionary contribution, a concept that would echo through the corridors of time and influence empires for millennia to come, was his approach to conquered peoples. Where earlier imperial powers had ruthlessly imposed their gods, languages, and customs while systematically suppressing local traditions, Cyrus pioneered a radical alternative, a policy of unprecedented cultural and religious tolerance. Under Persian governance, conquered populations maintained their ancestral customs, continued operating their traditional administrative systems, and freely practiced their indigenous religious rituals without interference. This revolutionary imperial strategy focused narrowly on ensuring two essential elements: political loyalty and steady tribute flow, while otherwise allowing subject peoples remarkable autonomy in their daily and cultural lives. This approach, as practical as it was enlightened, created a more stable empire requiring fewer resources to maintain control. As this formidable new power expanded inexorably westward, Nabonidus, the last king of independent Babylon, found himself in an increasingly precarious position, isolated both politically and militarily, having made the extraordinary decision to abandon his capital for a decade, residing instead in the Arabian oasis of Tama. For reasons scholars still debate, Nabonidus had returned to Babylon only to find his legitimacy severely compromised. His unusual religious devotion to Sign, the lunar deity, had deeply alienated the influential priesthood of Marduk, traditionally revered as Babylon's supreme patron god. His apparent disregard for crucial religious ceremonies, particularly the sacred New Year's festival where cosmic order itself was ritually renewed through elaborate ceremonies, had generated profound theological anxiety throughout Mesopotamian society. Meanwhile, the diverse peoples subjugated within Babylon's imperial boundaries nursed growing resentments against restrictive policies. These disaffected populations represented potential allies for any invader promising more tolerant governance, a promise Cyrus had already demonstrated he could fulfill. When Persian forces finally approached Babylonian territory in 539 BC, they encountered a kingdom fractured by internal divisions. Some frontier garrisons fought with desperate courage, while others capitulated without resistance. Nabonidus marshaled his remaining loyal forces to confront this existential threat. But the climactic battle that might have altered history's course never materialized. Meanwhile, the diverse peoples subjugated within Babylon's imperial boundaries nursed growing resentments against restrictive policies. These disaffected populations represented potential allies for any invader promising more tolerant governance, a promise Cyrus had already demonstrated he could fulfill. Instead, Cyrus's generals executed a masterful stratagem that would become legendary, diverting the mighty Euphrates to lower its waters just enough for soldiers to slip beneath Babylon's impenetrable defenses. The Nabonidus Chronicle, etched in clay by contemporary Babylonian scribes, recounts this monumental shift of power with striking understatement. In the month of Tashri II, when Cyrus attacked the army of Akkad in Opis on the Tigris, the inhabitants of Akkad revolted, but he massacred the confused inhabitants. The 14th day Sippar was seized without battle. Nabonidus fled. The 16th day, Ugbaru, governor of Gutium, and the army of Cyrus entered Babylon without battle. Afterward, Nabonidus was arrested in Babylon when he returned. This understated phrase, "without battle," stands in stark contrast to the cataclysmic destructions that had typically marked the fall of Mesopotamian powers throughout millennia. Even the dramatic biblical narrative in Daniel, with its haunting image of spectral fingers inscribing mysterious prophecies during Belshazzar's decadent feast, ultimately conveys the same historical truth. Babylon, the greatest city in the world, surrendered with barely a whisper of resistance. When Cyrus himself strode through Babylon's magnificent Ishtar Gate days later, he revealed the revolutionary vision that would transform imperial governance for centuries to come. Rather than playing the role of foreign subjugator, he seamlessly adopted Babylonian royal traditions, presenting himself not as conqueror, but as divinely chosen successor Marduk's instrument to restore proper worship and just rule after Nabonidus' religious transgressions. The famed Cyrus cylinder, a barrel-shaped clay proclamation unearthed by modern archaeologists, stands today as one of humanity's earliest recorded policy declarations on religious tolerance and human dignity. Cyrus articulates not just his peaceful arrival in Babylon and commitment to the city's prosperity, but most remarkably, his unprecedented policy allowing displaced populations to return to ancestral homelands with their sacred objects and rebuild their temples. For the Jewish community, this decree held profound significance. The biblical books of Ezra and Chronicles recount how Cyrus specifically authorized exiled Jews to return to Jerusalem and reconstruct their temple with expenses drawn from the royal treasury, though many chose to remain in the vibrant communities they had established in Mesopotamia. This magnanimous policy elevated Cyrus to a unique position in Jewish religious thought, with the prophet Isaiah even bestowing upon this Persian king the sacred title of Anointed One, Messiah. For Babylon itself, this peaceful conquest transformed its status from imperial capital to wealthy provincial jewel within a vastly larger political mosaic. Under Persian administration, Babylon retained its architectural splendor, religious significance, and commercial vitality. Its sophisticated administrative systems and scholarly traditions continued uninterrupted, now repurposed to serve a new imperial vision. Babylonian elite families, with their generations of administrative expertise and cultural knowledge, found themselves integrated into the Persian imperial hierarchy, their ancient skills valued and rewarded by their new overlords. The Persian Empire that Cyrus established and his successors expanded represented a revolutionary approach to multicultural governance. Its innovative provincial system divided the realm into administrative regions called satrapies, each under a governor satrap, typically selected from Persian nobility but supported by local officials familiar with regional customs. This ingenious structure balanced centralized authority with pragmatic local autonomy. A standardized imperial administrative language, Aramaic uniform coinage system, and an extensive royal road network, complete with regular post stations, facilitated governance across the empire's vast expanse, from the Aegean to the Indus Valley. Throughout this imperial framework, religious policy remained faithful to Cyrus's pioneering vision of tolerance. Local cults and spiritual practices continued without interference, while Persian rulers participated respectfully in traditional ceremonies when visiting major centers like Babylon. The Achaemenid kings themselves embraced Zoroastrianism, with its cosmic dualism of truth, Asha, versus falsehood, Druidge. But remarkably, they made no attempt to impose this faith on their diverse subjects, a radical departure from previous imperial approaches to religion. For 2 centuries, under Persian rule, Mesopotamia enjoyed unprecedented stability and prosperity. The region's legendary agricultural productivity and sophisticated commercial networks made it the crown jewel among imperial provinces. Meanwhile, Babylonian intellectual achievements, particularly in astronomy, mathematics, and administrative systems, flowed into and enriched Persian imperial practices, creating a vibrant cultural exchange that benefited both traditions. while Persian military protection and inclusion in an empire stretching from the Indus to the Mediterranean created unprecedented opportunities for merchants and officials. Paradise was not without its serpents. Babylon, that ancient jewel of civilization, chafed occasionally against foreign rule, particularly during moments when the imperial throne itself seemed vulnerable. During the chaotic succession crisis that brought Darius I to power around 522 BC, Babylon seized the opportunity to declare independence not once but twice, raising the banner of rebellion with desperate hope. Again in 465 BC, as news spread of Xerxes' assassination, the embers of independence flared briefly into flame. These rebellions, while crushed with imperial efficiency, revealed the persistent dream of autonomy that never fully died in Mesopotamian hearts. Yet notably, even in suppression, Persian administrators showed remarkable restraint. Compared to their Assyrian predecessors, there would be no mountains of skulls, no mass deportations, no obliteration of ancient cities that had characterized earlier imperial responses to defiance. Yet the truly transformative moment in this long transition had occurred 2 centuries earlier, when Cyrus the Great strode through Babylon's towering gates, not as a destroyer, but as a preserver. In that pivotal moment, he established a revolutionary paradigm of multicultural empire that would echo through corridors of power for millennia to come. The Persian conquest, while marking the definitive end of truly independent Mesopotamian political systems, paradoxically became the salvation of its cultural legacy. By incorporating rather than annihilating local traditions, by embracing rather than erasing indigenous wisdom, the Persian approach ensured that the intellectual treasures of humanity's first urban civilization would not be lost to the unforgiving winds of time. Under this enlightened imperial umbrella, the Persian Empire created a sanctuary where ancient knowledge could be maintained, refined, and eventually transmitted to emerging civilizations across a vast, interconnected world. In this unexpected way, the political subjugation of Mesopotamia became the vehicle for its immortality, ensuring that the profound legacy of the land between the rivers would continue to flow through human consciousness long after its political independence had faded into the mists of history. Chapter 10: The Twilight of Ancient Glory. 539 B.C. AD 600. The Persian conquest in 539 BC cast long shadows across the land between the rivers, marking the beginning of a gradual sunset for one of humanity's most venerable civilizations. While Mesopotamian cities, especially magnificent, Babylon would endure for centuries to come, with some settlements maintaining an unbroken human presence into our modern era. The distinctive cultural heartbeat that had pulsed for 3 millennia began to synchronize with external rhythms under successive waves of foreign rule. Under Persian dominion 539 to 331 BC, Mesopotamian traditions were treated with remarkable deference, lavished resources on ancient temples, and wove local elites into the fabric of their administration. The mathematical brilliance of Babylonian astronomy influenced Persian cosmological understanding, creating intellectual bridges between conqueror and conquered. During these 2 centuries, cultural continuity remained vibrant, even as political sovereignty faded into memory. A more profound transformation arrived with Alexander the Great, whose forces shattered Persian military might under Darius. In 331 BC, the young Macedonian strode into Babylon as a conquering hero. greeted by enthusiastic crowds, perhaps yearning for liberation from Persian oversight. Recognizing the city's unparalleled historical significance, Alexander envisioned Babylon as the glittering capital of his eastern realm, and initiated ambitious restoration projects for its sacred and royal structures. Fate, however, had different designs. Alexander's sudden death in 323 B.C. This protracted conflict eventually placed Mesopotamia under Seleucus's control, who established the Seleucid Empire spanning from Mediterranean shores to Central Asian steppes. Rather than honoring ancient Babylon as his seat of power, Seleucus founded a new capital, Seleucia, on the Tigris, approximately 90 kilometers north of the venerable city. This freshly constructed Greek-style polis, with its methodically grid-planned thoroughfares, dramatic theaters, athletic gymnasiums, and administrative complexes, represented a deliberate cultural transplantation, Hellenistic civilization implanted into Mesopotamia's ancient soil. Babylon's residents gradually drifted toward this new urban center, lured by economic prospects and favorable tax policies, initiating the slow diminishment of the ancient capital's prominence. As Babylon's population and importance dwindled under Seleucid governance, a fascinating cultural fusion began blossoming throughout the region. Greek became the language of administration and commerce, while Hellenic architectural elegance, artistic sensibilities, and religious practices took root across the landscape. Yet this was no simple cultural replacement. Rather, a rich synthesis emerged where multiple traditions coexisted and cross-pollinated. Venerable Mesopotamian temples continued their sacred operations alongside new Greek structures. The ancient cuneiform script, though increasingly specialized, remained vital for religious texts and astronomical calculations. In specialized scribal centers, scholars diligently copied and studied literary masterpieces from Mesopotamia's Golden Age, preserving intellectual treasures even as their cultural context transformed around them. This Greco-Mesopotamian cultural interweaving manifested most brilliantly in the intellectual sphere, where two ancient knowledge traditions engaged in productive dialogue. Babylonian astronomical expertise, with its emphasis on mathematical prediction of celestial movements, enriched Greek theoretical models of the cosmos. Simultaneously, Hellenic philosophical approaches offered new interpretive frameworks for Babylonian scholars contemplating their ancestral traditions. Perhaps no figure better embodies this cultural bridging than Berossus, a Babylonian priest who composed a Greek-language history of his homeland for the Seleucid ruler Antiochus I. Through this remarkable work, Berossus translated Mesopotamian historical and mythological narratives into forms comprehensible to a Hellenistic audience, creating a crucial conduit through which ancient wisdom could flow into new cultural contexts. The religious landscape of Hellenistic Mesopotamia underwent a fascinating metamorphosis. While ancient temple rituals persisted, they received less royal patronage than in previous centuries. A remarkable religious syncretism emerged as worshippers began equating Greek and Mesopotamian deities. The thunderous Zeus merged with mighty Marduk, wisdom-bearing Apollo with scribal Nabu, and the huntress Artemis with passionate Ishtar. This cultural blending created rich hybrid worship practices that honored both traditions simultaneously. Meanwhile, the cosmopolitan streets of Mesopotamian cities buzzed with religious innovation as Eastern mystery cults promised spiritual transformation. Philosophical schools offered intellectual frameworks for understanding existence, and astral religions looked to the heavens for divine guidance. The political winds shifted dramatically as the Seleucid Empire began crumbling under the weight of internal power struggles and mounting external threats. From the northeastern horizon emerged the Parthians, writing yet another chapter in the region's epic saga of imperial transitions. The Parthian era heralded a cultural pendulum swing back toward Eastern influences after the Hellenistic period. Though Greek remained the language of educated elites and administrative documents, Aramaic surged in everyday usage, while Iranian artistic motifs and royal symbolism increasingly adorned public spaces and official imagery. Unlike their predecessors, Parthian rulers employed a lighter imperial touch, granting substantial self-governance to local authorities, including Hellenistic city councils with their democratic traditions and ancient temple administrations with their millennia-old protocols. Babylon during this era resembled an aging dowager. Seleucia on the Tigris now throbbed as the region's commercial heartbeat, while across the river, Ctesiphon rose as the Parthian administrative nerve center. Remarkably, ancient Uruk, birthplace of urban civilization, nearly 3 millennia earlier, still maintained a vibrant presence. Its temple complex to Ishtar continuing to draw worshippers well into the Parthian period, a testament to the extraordinary resilience of Mesopotamian religious traditions. The Parthian period witnessed the twilight of one of humanity's most significant intellectual technologies, cuneiform writing. This distinctive script of wedge-shaped impressions pressed into clay, which had recorded everything from temple inventories to creation myths for over 3 millennia, slowly faded from use. The last known cuneiform astronomical text dates to AD 75, while the final precisely dated literary tablet was inscribed in 35 BC. This extinction of the ancient writing system created a profound cultural rupture. Though many Mesopotamian traditions endured through translation into other languages or via oral transmission from generation to generation, Judaism flourished across Mesopotamia during these centuries, with vibrant communities establishing themselves in major urban centers. The Babylonian Jewish community, descendants of those who had remained after Cyrus permitted their brethren to return to Jerusalem, developed into a powerhouse of religious scholarship and interpretation. During this fertile period, rabbinical discussions and debates laid the groundwork for what would eventually evolve into the monumental Babylonian Talmud, a vast compilation of legal opinions, ethical teachings, and theological explorations that would profoundly shape Jewish thought for millennia to come. The final chapter in Mesopotamia's imperial saga unfolded dramatically in AD 224, when the Sassanid Persians swept away Parthian dominance. This new Persian dynasty established a formidable, centralized Iranian state that would rule Mesopotamia until AD 651. The administrative machinery grew increasingly rigid and demanding, with ordinary citizens bearing heavier tax burdens and labor duties than under previous regimes. During this era, Ctesiphon blossomed into a metropolis of breathtaking grandeur, functioning as the winter jewel in the Sassanid imperial crown. At its heart stood the Tak Khosra Palace, whose enormous vaulted arch stretched across the sky like a man-made rainbow of brick and mortar. This architectural wonder would later inspire countless Islamic builders who gazed upon its magnificence with awe. Beyond the capital, other ancient Mesopotamian urban centers persisted, though many had shrunk considerably from their former glory. The cultural tapestry of late pre-Islamic Mesopotamia displayed extraordinary vibrancy and diversity. In the southern marshlands, Mandean communities performed their distinctive baptismal rituals in flowing waters, preserving ancient Gnostic traditions. Across the plains and cities, Manichaean missionaries passionately spread their dualistic faith that portrayed existence as an eternal struggle between light and darkness. Eastern Christianity, meanwhile, planted deep roots throughout the region. The Church of the Istifan, labeled Nestorian by outsiders, flourished under Persian rule despite occasional persecutions. These Christian communities developed distinctive theological perspectives and launched ambitious missionary endeavors that carried their faith along the Silk Road all the way to Imperial China. Jewish scholarship reached dazzling heights during this period. In bustling academies throughout Mesopotamia, brilliant rabbinical minds engaged in rigorous debate and interpretation, ultimately producing the monumental Babylonian Talmud around AD 500. This vast compendium of legal reasoning, ethical teaching, and spiritual wisdom would become the cornerstone of rabbinic Judaism, guiding Jewish communities worldwide for millennia thereafter. As these newer faiths flourished, the ancient indigenous traditions of Mesopotamia flickered like dying embers in scattered temples that had once bustled with worshippers and offerings. Dwindling bands of priests, the last guardians of rituals, stretching back thousands of years, continued their increasingly lonely vigils. With each passing generation, fewer young people learned the ancient ways, as the unbroken chain of tradition that had endured since Sumerian times gradually weakened link by link. This kaleidoscopic religious landscape underwent its final ancient transformation when Arab armies swept out of the Arabian Peninsula carrying the banner of Islam. The decisive moment came in 636 at the Battle of Qadisiyah, where Muslim forces shattered Sassanid military might. Within a decade, Arab warriors had seized control of all Mesopotamia. This conquered territory would later become the vibrant heartland of the Abbasid Caliphate after the founding of Baghdad in 762. This magnificent new Islamic capital rose just 30 kilometers from the ruins of ancient cities, echoing the cycle of successive urban centers emerging in the shadows of their predecessors. The region increasingly known as Iraq, derived from the Persian word for lowlands, experienced a cultural renaissance, albeit within an entirely new tradition that broke decisively with the ancient past. The pantheon that had watched over the land for millennium Idi Enlil, wise Enki, passionate, inanifated from living memory. The wedge-shaped cuneiform script that had preserved human thought for 3,000 years vanished from use. The ziggurats and temples that had dominated the skyline either crumbled into mysterious mounds or were transformed into mosques and palaces serving a new faith. Yet beneath these profound discontinuities, invisible threads of continuity wove the ancient into the new. The astronomical calculations of Babylonian priests enriched early Islamic scientific endeavors. Irrigation techniques perfected since the dawn of civilization continued nurturing crops along the river valleys. Administrative practices, refined through successive empires, subtly shaped Islamic governance structures. And in countless folk beliefs, literary motifs, and daily customs, ancient Mesopotamian influences persisted, their origins forgotten, but their essence alive. When did the last recognizable vestiges of Mesopotamian civilization finally disappear? No historian can provide a precise date. Like a mighty river flowing into vast marshlands, the distinctive culture born at Eridu in the 4th millennium BC gradually diffused its waters, merging with countless other currents to nourish new cultural ecosystems. The ancient became modern, not through abrupt replacement, but through gradual transformation, adaptation, and synthesis, creating not an ending, but a metamorphosis. Like precious artifacts preserved in ancient soil, elements of Mesopotamian heritage endured through the ages, woven into Jewish theological discourse, embedded in astronomical calculations that tracked celestial movements, hidden within irrigation channels that still quench thirsty fields, and pulsing through countless cultural veins that nourish civilizations even today. Their Mesopotamian origins, long forgotten, but their essence intact. The veil shrouding this magnificent ancient world began lifting in the 19th century, as determined archaeologists armed with shovels and boundless curiosity peeled back layers of accumulated earth. Each stroke of their tools unveiled astonishing treasures: cuneiform tablets, speaking long-silenced languages, ziggurats reaching skyward after millennia in darkness, and resplendent royal palaces emerging from their earthen tombs. When scholars finally deciphered the wedge-shaped writing pressed into clay tablets, humanity experienced a profound awakening. We discovered that this cradle of civilization had gifted us our first cities, earliest writing systems, and pioneering legal frameworks, fundamentally transforming our understanding of our collective origins. Today, ancient Mesopotamia breathes through the landscape of modern Iraq and Syrian archaeological wonders that punctuate desert horizons. In museum galleries, housing treasures of incalculable historical value, and in the very genetic and cultural fabric of contemporary inhabitants who walk lands their ancestors transformed from wilderness to cradle of human civilization. Yet, beyond these tangible remnants lies Mesopotamia's most enduring bequest. The foundational concepts that would shape all subsequent civilizations, intricate urban communities where humanity first learned to live together in unprecedented numbers, sophisticated writing systems that transformed fleeting thoughts into eternal records, comprehensive legal codes that brought order to human interaction, mathematical and astronomical innovations that imposed understanding upon chaos, and elaborate religious frameworks that addressed humanity's perpetual quest to comprehend our place amid the cosmic mystery. Thus, the narrative of ancient Mesopotamia concludes not with dramatic finality, but with gradual metamorphosis, a flowing transition from vibrant cultural continuity to diffused legacy, from living tradition actively practiced to archaeological memory painstakingly recovered, a passing of the torch rather than an extinguishing of the flame. This pattern illuminates the essential nature of human civilization itself, not a series of discrete chapters with clearly delineated beginnings and endings, but an eternal river of influence and adaptation flowing through time, each generation simultaneously inheriting, transforming, and occasionally rediscovering the accumulated wisdom of those who walked the earth before them, adding their own contributions to this ever-expanding legacy before passing it forward into hands not yet born. Epilogue: the legacy of Mesopotamia as the sands of time settle on our journey through ancient Mesopotamia. We pause to marvel at the monumental footprints this civilization left on the path of human progress. From between those legendary rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, flowed innovations that still ripple through our modern world in currents both visible and hidden. Writing, humanity's most transformative invention, first emerged from the creative minds of Uruk's inhabitants, who pressed simple wedges into soft clay. Around 3400 BCE, what began as humble accounting marks for tracking sheep and grain blossomed into something miraculous, a system that could capture the full spectrum of human thought. These early scribes created the first technology to transcend mortality, allowing ideas to outlive their creators. As their wedge-shaped symbols evolved into cuneiform, they unlocked new realms of possibility. Literature that stirred emotions, laws that structured society, and knowledge that accumulated across generations. This revolutionary concept that marks could preserve thought spread outward from Mesopotamia like ripples in a pond, fundamentally reshaping human civilization. The bustling cities of Sumer became humanity's first laboratories for urban living. Within their mud-brick walls, our ancestors tackled challenges that still occupy our minds today. How do thousands of people live together peacefully? Who controls shared resources? What structures maintain order amid diversity? Their innovative solutions, city councils debating in open forums, codified laws carved in stone, taxation systems supporting public works, temples anchoring communities, established blueprints that countless civilizations would adapt and refine. Mesopotamian scholars, gazing at stars from their ziggurat observatories, developed mathematical systems of astonishing sophistication and lasting impact. Their sexagesimal system, based on units of 60, continues to structure how we experience time and measure the world. Every time your watch ticks through 60 seconds, or you calculate using 360 degrees in a circle, you're channeling the intellectual legacy of Sumerian mathematicians who developed these concepts thousands of years ago. The majestic law codes from Yunamu's earliest known collection to Hammurabi's famous stele revolutionized how societies conceived justice, though their specific punishments may seem harsh to modern sensibilities. Their underlying innovation was profound. Laws should stand above even kings, should be publicly displayed for all to know, and should apply with consistency rather than caprice. This radical concept that governance requires established rules rather than arbitrary power forms the bedrock of every modern legal system. The rich tapestry of Mesopotamian spiritual thought continues to echo through later religious traditions. When we read of Noah's flood, we hear echoes of Utnapishtim's earlier deluge in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Concepts of divine judgment, cosmic battles between order and chaos, and humanity's relationship with the divine found their early expressions in Mesopotamian theology. From temple hierarchies to ritual practices, from architectural forms to theological concepts, countless elements of later religious traditions can trace their ancestral roots back to the sacred precincts of Mesopotamian temples. Technological marvels from Mesopotamia didn't merely change their world, they transformed the human experience forever. Ingenious irrigation networks, designed by Sumerian farmers, turned harsh semi-arid plains into verdant fields, bursting with grain, multiplying food production exponentially. The humble potter's wheel, seemingly simple invention, revolutionized manufacturing, allowing artisans to create perfectly symmetrical vessels with unprecedented speed and precision. Metallurgists progressed from rudimentary copper implements to sophisticated bronze alloys, forging tools and weapons of increasing complexity and durability. The introduction of wheeled vehicles shattered limitations on transportation, while master craftspeople perfected glassmaking and textile production to levels of artistry that would influence civilizations across continents for millennia to come. Between the mighty Tigris and Euphrates, humanity's earliest experiments in governance unfolded from independent city-states to vast territorial empires. Mesopotamian rulers, from ambitious Sargon to magnificent Nebuchadnezzar, wrestled with political dilemmas, strikingly familiar to modern leaders, balancing local autonomy against central authority, reconciling ancestral traditions with administrative efficiency, and forging unity among diverse populations. Their triumphs and failures in statecraft created a living laboratory of political possibility, offering both inspiring models and cautionary tales that would echo through subsequent civilizations across the ancient world. The world's earliest known literature emerged from Mesopotamian scribes, who pressed into clay tablets stories that still resonate with profound human emotion. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving literary masterpiece, confronts our eternal struggle with mortality, celebrates the transformative power of friendship, and searches for meaning in the shadow of inevitable death. Wisdom texts pondered questions of suffering and justice that would later find parallels in works like the biblical book of Job. Creation myths contemplated humanity's place in the cosmic order, while the full spectrum of human expression, passionate love poetry, majestic royal hymns, pithy proverb collections, and humorous tales that still provoke laughter after thousands of years, all found voice through cuneiform, establishing narrative traditions that would shape the course of world literature. Perhaps Mesopotamia's most profound legacy lies in demonstrating humanity's capacity for cumulative cultural achievement, our unique ability to build upon previous generations' discoveries, preserve and transmit knowledge across centuries, adapt ancestral practices to emerging challenges, and create institutions that outlast individual human lifespans. This fundamental aspect of human civilization, our ability to stand on the shoulders of those who came before, who's found, it's fresh, sustained. As we trace these ancient influences into our modern world, we must recognize the intricate tapestry of cultural transmission. Some Mesopotamian innovations directly shaped subsequent societies through documented contact and deliberate adoption, passing from hand to hand like precious heirlooms. Others may represent parallel solutions to universal human challenges, with similarities reflecting our common humanity rather than direct influence. In many cases, Mesopotamian practices reached later cultures through complex networks of intermediaries, transformed through successive cultural translations, like whispers in an eternal game of telephone, stretching across millennia. The connection between ancient Mesopotamia and our contemporary world resembles a vast river delta with countless interconnected channels. Some streams maintain direct, visible connections to their source. Others divide and rejoin through labyrinthine networks. Some appear to vanish underground, only to resurface unexpectedly in distant places and times, their origins obscured but their essence intact. The cultural waters that first gathered in the fertile floodplains between the Tigris and Euphrates have long since merged with countless other tributaries, creating the great river of human civilization. Yet they remain fundamental to the flow that continues to this day. From our vantage point, in a world transformed by digital technology and space exploration, we might be tempted to dismiss these ancient achievements as primitive curiosities. But the essential challenges of human existence, creating sustainable food systems, establishing just societies, understanding our cosmic context, expressing our deepest emotions through art, and confronting our mortality, remain as urgent today as they were for the citizens of Uruk or Babylon, who first grappled with them beneath Mesopotamian skies. The epic story of Mesopotamia reminds us that civilization is not a possession to be claimed, but a process to be continued. Not a static achievement, but a dynamic, ongoing project. This grand human endeavor began millennia before our birth, and will continue long after we have returned to dust. We are momentary caretakers of traditions, innovations, and wisdom, accumulated through countless generations, with roots stretching back to those first visionary farmers who settled beside ancient rivers and initiated humanity's greatest experiment, the creation of something more enduring and meaningful than any individual life. As we conclude our journey through ancient Mesopotamia's remarkable story, we can recognize how these distant ancestors, though separated from us by vast gulfs of time and circumstance, confronted challenges strikingly familiar to our modern hearts and minds. In their moments of triumph and tragedy, wisdom and folly, compassion and cruelty, we glimpse reflections of our own complex humanity. Though the external forms of civilization have transformed dramatically across millennia, the fundamental human experiences, love and fear, wonder and doubt, creation and destruction, remain remarkably constant. The living legacy of Mesopotamia pulses through our measurement of time, our written communication, our urban landscapes, our legal concepts, our religious imagery, our scientific inquiry, and our perpetual quest to create meaning and beauty in a world that, like the unpredictable floods that both nourished and threatened ancient Mesopotamian cities, remains forever changing and eternally challenging. As our journey through the cradle of civilization comes to a close, dear listeners, may you drift peacefully into slumber with visions of ancient Mesopotamia dancing through your dreams. From the first tentative settlements along the Tigris and Euphrates to the magnificent city-states of Sumer, we've walked together through humanity's earliest steps toward civilization. Perhaps tonight, as you close your eyes, you'll glimpse the sun-baked walls of Uruk rising from the desert plain, or hear the distant echoes of priests chanting in Eridu's temple. Maybe you'll wander through Çatalhöyük's rooftop pathways, or witness the first scribe pressing a reed stylus into soft clay, forever changing how humans would preserve their thoughts and deeds. Let the gentle rhythm of this ancient tale carry you to restful shores. The kings and gods of Mesopotamia have shared their story, and now they fade back into history's embrace as you drift toward peaceful slumber. Good night, and may the wisdom of our ancestors guide you through gentle dreams until we meet again on another journey through time.